2006 is now convened. All rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, with liberty and justice for all. Secretary Villalobos.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Montecito Planning Commission hearings are televised live on County Santa Barbara CSB TV Channel 20 at 9 a.m. in the South Coast, Lompoc, San Ynez Valley, Santa Maria, and Orchid areas. Rebroadcast of Montecito Planning Commission hearings will be on Fridays at 5 p.m. on CSB TV Channel 20. And now for the roll call. Commissioner Bierig. Here. Commissioner Gottstinker. Here. Commissioner Phillips. Here. Commissioner Tilsher. Here. And Commissioner McGreblian.
Here. Secretary Black.
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, in terms of your agenda this morning, item number 1 has been dropped because you acted on the zoning ordinance reformatting program when you were sitting with both the County Planning Commission and your commission. So we completed that item and don't need to take that up today. Items 2, 3, and 4 are set to go today, and staff is ready. Item number 5, the subcommittee status briefing. I'm recommending that we continue until your meeting in October so we can be a little bit more prepared in addressing the commission. I think that the chair would like to bring it back to sort of our steering group first before coming back to the county planning or to the Montecito Planning Commission.
Good.
So
excellent.
We'll bring that back next month. Then in terms of the
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, may I ask a question? Mrs. Black, do we have a meeting after our October 18th meeting on October 19th?
Yes. Why don't I move into the protection report and we can.
Because I unfortunately am not going to be able to attend.
That's very unfortunate. So we have our meeting today, and then the next meeting of the Montecito Planning Commission is October 18th, and that day is entirely devoted to Westmont College. What we had hoped, and perhaps we need to reconsider this because I think it's important to have as full a commission as we can when considering Westmont, is to continue the hearing to the next day, the Thursday, following your regular meeting, to hopefully finish up the staff presentation, the applicant's presentation, public comments, and get some input from the commission. And then we were also going to update you on the subcommittee status work. And then we expected to come back to your commission at a special hearing in November, and I think we had, in December, to again take up Westmont College, I think December 7th. So maybe we need to talk about what dates work best for your commission in terms of Westmont. The reason we're avoiding the November 15th Montecito Planning Commission is it's our understanding that Chair McGreblian won't be here for that particular date.
What date was that?
On the November 15th Montecito Planning Commission.
Yes, that is correct.
So we definitely want to try and provide the commission with enough hearings this year to hopefully act on the Westmont project, but we certainly want to pick dates that the commissioners are available, so we might want to do a little bit of work on that this morning.
Commissioner Gottstinker, you have a comment?
Yes, at the MBAR hearing last week, it was stated that there was also a special hearing scheduled for November 6th, so it kind of left
I think we had,
Mr.
Chair and Commissioner Gottstinker, I think we had thought we might need November 6th, but I'm not sure if we're going to or not. Our intention was to try and get through all of the staff and applicant presentation, public comment, and then get commissioner comments, and then spend a bit of time addressing your concerns and coming back to the commission. So it depends on whether we finish in October, in those 2 meetings in October that we had slated. If we need November 6th, then we would use that as well. So perhaps perhaps the October 18th, 19th isn't going to work if Commissioner Tilsher isn't going to be here, and we need to select a different date than October 19th for the, to try and wrap up.
Are there any dates that the other commissioners would have a conflict following the 18th of October? This is a reserve date. Well, in fact, I think we'll need it definitely.
We will definitely
Yeah.
need that second date, Mr.
Right.
Chair. So if October 19th does not work, is there a day the following week, either the 23rd or the 26th, that might work for the commissioners? That's either Monday or Thursday that following week.
Commissioner Tilsher?
Sorry to be such a problem, but I'm gone till the 30th on something I can't avoid, so I don't know what to do about it. I'm good any time in November.
What about, Mr. Chair and members of the commission, what if we were to try to conduct the first hearing on October 16th for Westmont and then use the 18th to finish up, that Monday, Wednesday? Would that work for the commission? I'm not sure it works for us, but I'm just looking for dates at this point. October 16th
So
and
what
18th.
you're saying, Mrs. Black, is that we would be in session on the 16th of October and then come back on the 18th of October? Is that what's being proposed?
That's what I'm suggesting.
Well,
As
that
a
works. That
potential.
works for me.
Works for me.
I think that works for me. I left my calendar in the car. I'll check
Okay.
at the break.
Okay, well, why
but I
don't we
think
all-
tentatively.
Why don't we all check, and then we can check back in on that particular item. I'll check with the staff and make sure the hearing room's available. And then I think Ms. Gottstinker had a very good point. Is November 6th a workable backup date in case we do need another hearing date before we conclude?
Yeah, that was the date I was looking
December,
at.
November
In
6th.
attempt to accommodate Commissioner Tilsher.
Well, why don't we just all continue to reserve that November 6th just in case? And then,
And you
We'll
want
see
us to
where we're
look
at.
also at the 16th of October?
yes.
Okay, so there are
I-
two
my-
dates then.
My
for the
preference would
other
be
one in here.
to have the commission consider Westmont on the 16th and 18th, and then reserve November 6th, just in
Everything
case
in.
we need some additional time.
Okay,
Okay?
No, I hear
So
you.
we'll check back in before we
good.
conclude our
You'll canvass
meeting
the
today.
commissioners?
Yes.
All right.
It's fine with me.
Good. Okay.
Fine.
And then in terms of the rest of the year, you do have a meeting on November 15th, and there's about a half day's worth of work already scheduled for that day, with the Largora appeal, the West House conditional use permit, and an entry gate project. And then your last meeting of the year is scheduled for December 20th, and we currently don't have anything on that date, but it's a ways out.
All right.
So, and we also have the Planning Commissioners Holiday Lunch scheduled for December 6th. I think that will be somewhere in Santa Barbara. We'll let you know the location as that arises. So I think that that takes care of the year.
Yeah, how could that?
What was that
It's on the
last
schedule.
one, Secretary? That was
December
that holiday
6th is
meeting?
the holiday, Planning Commission Holiday Lunch.
It's on the agenda.
It's on your projection report.
Oh, there it is. Yeah, that's the usual.
Right.
Do you have any other comments, Secretary?
No, I believe that's it.
Okay, next item is the Director's Report.
Mr. Chair and members of the Commission, as you know, the Board of Supervisors, with the exception of a meeting in Santa Maria last week, has been on vacation for the last essentially 4 weeks, and was again on vacation yesterday, or not on vacation, but they were dark yesterday. So, in terms of anything coming out of the Board of Supervisors, you really have nothing to report. Let you know that the ZORP item is going to be going to the Board of Supervisors in October, on October 17th. and also to alert you to ethics training for boards and commissions. That is on October 27th. That's for any boards and commissions who receive any remuneration. So if there's any remuneration for travel or anything like that, then it's required that they participate in that training. Some of you, I'm not sure, may have already done this training and don't have to be concerned about it. It certainly is available even if you don't receive remuneration. I think it's going to be put on by Shane Stark, and I'm told that he's going to bring a bit of levity to it so that you can enjoy it while you're getting the training. So again, that's October 27th. We recommend that this kind of activity that you participate in. I think it's good so that you keep an even keel in terms of dealing with ethical issues that can arise and cause a lot of problems for us in government if they aren't carefully watched. Other than that, I look forward to having a great meeting today, listening in on you.
Thank you for your comments. Next item on the agenda is opportunity for public comment on any item that is not on the agenda.
No.
There's no public comment. Next item is the Commissioner's Informational Report. Commissioner Tilsher.
Let's see, I attended the Land Use Committee meeting for the Montecito Association, their last meeting.
Commissioner Phillips. Nothing, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Gostenker.
Yes, I attended the Montecito BAR meeting on, I think it was the 25th of, what was the last? Whenever their last meeting was, when they heard the Westmont project, I was in attendance at that meeting, and then I also attended, just prior to that meeting, a Mountain Drive Community Association meeting.
Commissioner Perrig.
Nothing to report, Mr. Chairman.
I too attended the Montecito BAR meeting, the last meeting, which was on the Westmont, and heard that presentation and some of the public comments. I understand that they're going to continue with their discussion of that subject on next Monday, on the 25th.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, I also attended that MBAR meeting
Yes,
on
thank you.
Westmont.
Next item is P&D divisional briefings.
Mr. Chair, I don't believe we have any divisional briefings this morning.
All right. The next item are the minutes. Did you get them? Do we have copies of the minutes yet?
Mr. Chair, since the minutes aren't available, and obviously you haven't had a chance to review them yet, perhaps we could just trail that to the end of your agenda. We'll get you copies, and you can peruse them at a break or something. So I
Very
think we
good.
can go ahead and start the standard agenda with item number 2. We'll just wait for David to come back, and he can read it into the record.
All right, we accept your suggestion, Secretary. Would you like to begin the presentation on the first agenda item, standard agenda?
We need David to come back and read it
Wait
into
for
the record.
Secretary Villalobos.
Or Terry will.
You can
Thank
do
you,
it.
Terry.
Oh, item number 2. The following is the hearing on the request of Jack Amon, owner, to consider case number 06CDH26, application filed on May 24th, 2006, for a coastal development permit, and to accept the exemption pursuant to Section 15303E of the state guidelines for the implementation of the California Environmental Quality Act.
Mr. Imhoff.
Mr. Chair, thank you very much. Ms. Nicole Mayshore will be presenting today's presentation.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the Commission. My name is Nicole Mayshore. I'm a planner with Development Review South. Today I will be presenting the Amon Spa Project, 06CDH 26. Before I begin my presentation, I'd like to alert your Commission that I received a letter from the Pearl Chase Society on September 12, 2006, which should be included in your packet. today. The proposed project is located at 1567 Ramona Lane in the Montecito area. The parcel is in the 20R1 Single Family Residential Zone District under Article 2 of the County Zoning Ordinance. The project is before your commission today because it is within the Coastal Commission Appeals jurisdiction. The property is also within the Flood Hazard Overlay District and an environmentally sensitive habitat overlay area associated with Oak Creek. The proposed project is a coastal development permit for an in-ground spa equipment storage structure, and grading of less than 50 cubic yards. This slide shows the proposed spa and spa equipment storage structure in relation to the existing residence. This slide shows a plan and longitudinal view of the proposed in-ground spa. This slide shows the proposed spa location here in this grassy area. The main policy issues with this project include the fact there is mapped environmentally sensitive habitat and flood hazard overlays on the property. With regard to the mapped environmentally sensitive habitat, the county biologist has reviewed the project and determined that there would be no adverse effects from the development because of the following reasons. Oak Creek is a disturbed and channelized creek. There would be no native vegetation removed or affected, and the site is currently landscaped. Additionally, the project has been conditioned to require fencing along the creek bank and restoration in the event of damage to the sensitive habitat area. With regard to the map flood hazard overlay, flood control has reviewed the project and has recommended approval of the project subject to conditions of approval. STEP has also reviewed historic resource issues as mentioned in the letter from the Pearl Chase Society. The existing residence was designed by George Washington Smith and is considered historically significant. However, the landscaping on site is not considered historically significant, and the proposed project would have no adverse effect on the historic value of the site. As conditioned, the project is consistent with the comprehensive plan, including the coastal land use plan and the Montecito community plan. As conditioned, the project is consistent with Article 2 zoning requirements. Staff's recommendation today is that you adopt the required findings included in Attachment A, accept the exemption pursuant to CEQA Section 15303E, and approve the project, case number 06CDH26, subject to the conditions of approval. That will conclude staff's presentation.
Okay, before we continue, I'd like to know whether or not any of the commissioners were able to visit the site.
I visited the site, although I was unable to get behind the gates.
Commissioner Phillips,
Yes, me as well.
Commissioner Gostenker,
No, I did not visit the site.
Commissioner Berg.
Yes, I did visit the site.
Were you able to get in through the gate?
I did not, but I was on, previous time I've been on that property a number of years ago. I'm familiar with the Back Creek area.
I was unable to, I did visit the site, but I was unable to get in the gate. And I have a suggestion to Secretary that in the future when a project is presented to us, if the property has a gate, that you provide a phone number for a person to contact so that we can make arrangements to enter the property. Commissioner Phillips?
Mr. Chair, just wanted to point out that we do include phone numbers for both the applicant and the agent on your staff report. So if you need that in advance to conduct your site visits, we can certainly provide that, but it is included on the staff report.
Wait a minute, which number are you referring to?
There are phone numbers for the owner, applicant, agent, and then the
okay.
engineer on the staff report.
And these are numbers that we can use?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, in addition, staff is always available to arrange a site visit if you'd like, so feel free to call us.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, staff, I understand the city has an organized bus tour to visit sites. I suppose that has to be noticed if everyone's together. I've made some of these phone calls, and people are reluctant to invite me over. I mean, they're saying, well, how do I know who you are? I mean, it's a little awkward. Is there another way to do this?
Mr. Chair and Commissioner Phillips, I think that probably the best thing to do if you are having trouble getting on the site is just to call staff, and we never have any trouble arranging for it. So we're happy to do that.
Maybe you can make the phone call first so that we're not
Just give us a call. And we
appearing
will,
to be after their
we will
heart
do
or
that.
anything. You know.
Yes. I'm a little bit hesitant to arrange for group site visits for every agenda because I think it's just hard to get the commissioners coordinated to do so. But on larger projects, we certainly do that.
Mr.
Commissioner
Chairman, if I could offer, I've had the most success calling the architect that's prepared the plans as a method of getting in, because they generally have access, they need it for their work, and sometimes they've just given me the gate code over the phone so I could let myself in. So you might try that one.
Good. I think that solves the problem. All right, is the applicant present? Please, if you'd like to make some comments. Pardon, yes.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Jack Eamon. Hopefully the project stands on its own. Yeah, certainly. Yeah. There. Okay. My name is Jack Eamon. I live at 1567 Ramona Lane. This is my wife, Joan. Hopefully the project stands on its own. We have lived in this home 2.5 years now, approximately. Would very much like to have a spa in our backyard without causing any problem to our neighbors or any of the environmental sensitivities of the property. And I believe that we have designed it such that that is the case. If you have any questions, we're available and would be happy to answer them.
Are there any questions for Mr. Amon? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh, just a moment.
Yeah,
There is a
certainly.
question.
Yeah.
I notice on the site plan that we've got the spa equipment, over to the side of your existing residence.
Yes.
How close is your closest neighbor to that spa equipment?
That will be set back, I believe it's 8 feet from the property line.
Right.
And there's about an 8-foot hedge there on that
Between-
on our
okay.
eastern boundary with the Horrells to our east. Yes.
Right. And will that spa equipment be enclosed?
Yes, it will.
Completely enclosed?
Yes. Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Any other questions? Thank you very much, Mr. Amon. It's an opportunity here for public comment on this project. Is there any public comment? No public comment. The public comment period is closed. The commission is ready for deliberation. Commissioner Tilcher?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to make a motion for approval of case number 06CDH 50-3026. And number 1, adopt the required findings for the project specified in Attachment A of the staff report, including the California Environmental Quality Act findings. Number 2, accept the exemption included as Attachment B pursuant to the state CEQA guidelines, Section 15303E, small structures. And 3, approve case number 06CDH-50-3026, subject to the conditions of approval included as Attachment C.
Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second that motion.
Is there any, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion is carried unanimously.
Mr. Chair, before moving on to the next item, I just wanted to thank Nicole Mishore. This was her first presentation to either the Montecito or County Planning Commission. I think she did a nice job.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Secretary Villalobos.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The following is a hearing on the request of Adele Goja, architect for the owner, to consider 06 CDH 19, application filed on April 10, 2006 for a coastal development permit, and to accept the exemption pursuant to Section 15303 of the state guidelines for implementation of the California Environmental Quality Act.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the Commission. My name is Peter Imhoff, Supervising Planner for Development Review South. As with the last project, this comes to your Commission because it's located in the Coastal Appeals Jurisdiction and requires a hearing and is therefore not treated as a ministerial permit. The project is located on Fernald Point Lane on a 0.29 acre parcel zoned 1E1 in Article 2. The parcel is currently developed with an existing 5,974 square foot single-family residence. The project includes a new outdoor fire pit, barbecue and outdoor kitchen, new beach access stairs, construction of an outdoor staircase and attached residence, less than 50 cubic yards of grading, and it also includes a portable spa and rinse-off area. We would request that attachment C be amended to explicitly note the portable spa that is not currently stated clearly. This next slide shows a site plan of the existing site and the proposed site plan with the reconfigured deck. This next slide shows the lower level of the site plan with the new stairs, the portable spa area, and the reconfigured fire pit. And this slide shows the exterior staircase that's proposed as part of the project. This slide shows the south elevation of the house looking from the beach with the reconfigured deck. The project would have no impact on public access or recreation on the beach. This was treated as exempt from Montecito BAR review as a minor exterior alteration, and the project protects public views. The project also sits on an interior lot and meets interior setback requirements for an interior lot. As conditioned, the project would be consistent with the comprehensive plan, including the coastal land use plan and Montecito community plan, and would also be consistent with Article 2 zoning requirements. Staff recommends that the Commission adopt the required findings included in Attachment A, accept the exemption pursuant to CEQA Section 15303E, and approve the project subject to the conditions of approval as amended. And that concludes staff's presentation.
Commissioner Phillips?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Imhoff, can you tell me what an interior lot is? It seems to me this is right on the beach. What is the definition of interior?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Tilsher, an interior lot is a lot that is accessed by a driveway as opposed to a public road. In this case, at the end of Fernald Point Lane, there's what's known as a diminishing easement that serves each successive lot at the end of that lane, which is a private road. So under the definition in the ordinance, this Fernald Point Lane at that point counts as a driveway, which means that the lot is not served by a public or private road.
And therefore interior.
And therefore, typically an interior lot is a lot that is a landlocked parcel, essentially, one that doesn't front a public street. Where a lot fronts a public street, the normal front setback is required. Here in this location, because this counts as an interior lot, the setback is limited to the interior lot setback requirement, which is 10 feet. This is the way this particular site has been treated in the past on prior permit decisions, and it would be consistent with those prior permit decisions to treat this as an interior lot at this point.
One last question. What is a portable spa? How do you...
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Phillips, for that question, I would defer to the applicant and let the architect speak to that. My understanding is that a portable spa would not be permanently fixed in that location, that it would be something that was pre-manufactured and delivered to the site.
Okay.
And also above ground.
I see what it is. Okay.
Commissioner Tilsher, do you have a question? No, I'm sorry. Apropos of our previous conversation about access to the gate, that gate separates a number of parcels beyond. Is the telephone number for the architect given here in this instance one that wherein the architect could give us access to that gate?
Mr. Chair, yes, it is. On the front page of the staff report, Harrison Design's phone number and the project architect Adele Goja's number is listed.
Yeah, and that person could give us access to that external gate?
I believe so. If not, again, staff is always available to arrange a site visit if you need to get onto the site.
I think that may very well be the best way for us to proceed in any event. Commissioner Tilsher?
I just kind of wonder, that access code is for a lot of homes behind that gate. I'm not so positive that they would be able to give that number out. I'm not sure.
Well, that was the reason I asked the question, but perhaps staff can provide some initiative here and gain access for us in any event. I think that might be the best way to do it. However, it's not always clear from the project description as to whether or not there is a gate, so that before we make a visit, we have to know that in order to make some arrangement. I mean, I sometimes arrive at a parcel and find that there's a gate there, and I had no preconception of that or pre-notice of that.
Mr. Chair, it's probably a good idea generally to contact staff and the applicant anyway to advise them that you're going to visit the site. So, again, we're happy to make that arrangement even at the last minute.
Commissioner Tilsher?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What if, would it be possible to put on the front of the staff report that there is a gate and that for access to call such and such?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Tilsher, I don't see why not. If we are aware that there's a gate, we could certainly indicate that in the project description, sure.
I think that would be very helpful,
Yeah.
Mr. Imhoff. Okay, any other questions for staff? Commissioner Gostanker?
Yes, as part of the project submittal, there were no photographs of the house from the beach. I mean, I noticed that it's not in your PowerPoint and it's not in you know, and given that the access was very difficult to that site, it's like, for me, it's kind of difficult to determine what the impacts of the proposed project really are, given that I couldn't see it. And there's no photographs. I mean, I might have been able to do something, feel more comfortable with the project had there been photographs of the house as it faces the beach, given that's where all of this new construction is going to take place.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Gottstanker, that's a valid point, and I apologize that I don't have a photo of the south elevation of the house as part of this slide presentation.
Okay. Does the applicant? Well, they're shaking their heads over there,
So you will get to see it.
Okay. Any other comments for staff? Is the applicant present? Would you like to make any comment?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the Commission. My name is Adele Goja, and I'm with Harrison Design Associates. I do have some additional information that I'd like to pass on to you. Hopefully, this will give you a better understanding of what this project entails. I might put this up on there. These are As Mr. Imhoff described, this project, at least for our office, is really like a second phase for our clients. And the first phase was an interior remodel. Again, for our office, this is the second phase of the project, which is improvements and repairs to the exterior of the home. And most of the areas that we're improving are off the beach and between the beach and the house, repairing the decks and the benches that have been weathered. One of the things that a lot of the homes along this road have is beach access. And in order to get from the beach through this house, you actually have to go through the multi-levels. There's only access to the beach from the interior of the house. So it was kind of our recommendation to put in exterior stairs, which would give the Blackburns much more flexibility to use their site. And we were able to locate that stairs along a side yard property line. I think, Peter, if it might be helpful to put this one up. What I just gave to Mr. Emhoff were some conceptual drawings. These were computer generated to help our client have an understanding of what the design intent was. There have been some minor modifications made since then, but the intent is really the same. It's to repair the deck, repair the benches, relocate the portable spa, improve the fire pit and seating arrangement on the eastern corner of the lot. And again, the other second photo will be the access stairs to get from Fernald Point Lane down to the beach.
Ms. Goja, would you point out the comment you made pertaining to the comment you made about access to the beach, external access to the beach? Is it from the side there?
Yes, from the side.
From that side? And that leads where? To, there's a wall there, or is there a continuation of the wall?
There's a continuation of that stairs from the rear deck on the south to the north street elevation of the house.
Okay. Out to the front of the house, I presume.
Thank you, Mr. Emhoff. And Commissioner Phillips, was that clear to you what the portable spa was?
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Yes. Question though, the stairs are for the owners. It's not
That's
a
correct.
easement. It's not a public access.
No, it is for the owner's use.
Commissioner Gottsdenker?
Yes, I notice on the site plan that we've got a 10-foot side yard setback, but there's no dimension lines from the outside edge of the stairs to the property line. So how wide are those stairs, and how much do they encroach into the 10-foot setback?
Actually, I might defer to Mr. Emhoff to get the correct
And
wording of the
I may have
ordinance.
missed something in the staff report. I can definitely, own
Mr.
that.
Chair, Commissioner Gottsdenker, I believe that the stairs encroach 3 feet, which is allowable under the ordinance. I can find that exact ordinance wording for you if you'd like, but that is an allowable encroachment into the side yard setback.
Okay, that's what I actually wanted to know. Thank you.
Commissioner Phillips?
I can make a motion, Mr. Chair, if you'll entertain it.
Not yet. I think we have to ask for public comment first.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not entirely clear about this access to the beach from outside the house. That means from the area around the stairs there, going out to the front? Is that the area that you say is in excess, provides access?
See to this push. Yes, this is the lower deck elevation at the south.
Right.
And these are the proposed stairs. And yes, this is the area that is 3 feet wide. It does go into the side yard setback.
No, I understand that. That's
This
not
area
the
goes up
question.
to their private upper deck. And these door swings right here, these go right to their front entry. So what it allows them to do is to come home, park the car in the garage, and bring, if they'd like to, bring their things right down to the beach.
Oh, I see.
Instead of going down, this is a multi-level home. And also, I just think it's nice to have the beach access, which the stairs allows them to go through, and up, directly up to the street.
Street level?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, I understand now.
Okay.
Any other questions for the applicant?
Just one if I could.
Commissioner Berg?
Mrs. Goja, I assume you worked with the neighbor on the east side. Were there any concerns about the exterior stairwell?
Not that we're aware of, no.
Okay. Didn't come up.
No.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank
I
you.
actually have another
question.
Yeah, Ms. Goja, I notice in the photographs, and thank you for providing those, that there is an extensive amount of vegetation right up against the edge of the house. What's going to happen with all that between the residents that Commissioner Barrick is referring to? It looks to me like a lot of that's going to have to disappear.
Actually, most of the work that we're proposing is within the areas where construction currently exists. So
Well,
most of that vegetation that you
not
may
the
see
stairs.
to the east.
Yeah, I mean, is it gonna mean that a lot of that vegetation needs to be trimmed back to make room for the stairs?
Yes, some of that vegetation, yes, will be removed. There is a significant change in elevation from the finished grade up to where the stairs exist. So maybe possibly what you see is vegetation that occurs closer to the property line or lower at the grade level.
Okay.
Not the vegetation.
between the properties. I don't.
Yeah. If the
Oh, that's a no now? I'm hearing a no now.
if you, yeah,
Okay.
if you look at the, let's see. So the actual elevation of where the stairs occurs is much higher than where the vegetation grows. I don't know if that helps to explain it a little better.
Yes.
So the area
yes, it
where
does.
actually the area where the piles will come down, or where that will meet the grade level at the street, are really the only areas that are really touching the existing grade.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Gottstenker, I can add that no tree removal is proposed as part of the project.
And this is just a quick, Chairman Gribley, may I ask one
Yes,
more
please.
question here? And this is not with regards necessarily to this, specific to this project, but I noticed that in the staff report and then looking at the structure, that what is the overall height of this structure? Do we know? And when when it appears to be a three-story structure, and so what I'm looking at, is this was this grandfathered in as far as overall height prior to the Article 2 coming online, or how did this all come about? I mean, this is just information for me
I noticed from the report, staff report, that there was a permit in 1984 for the addition of the third story. So that was the last time when there was any significant construction.
Yeah,
Mr.
and I'm just wondering how, is that prior to Article 2 coming online? Because Article 2 limits, limits coastal development to 2 stories. So I'm just kind of curious as to what the mechanism was that allowed for 3-story residents to be built right on the beach.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Gottstenker, this is an existing permitted house. This is not part of the current proposal.
No, I understand that. I'm not asking it for a current proposal. I'm asking for my own information, how this came about and why.
The height as it was calculated by the applicant using the averaging method, which still applies in this area, is an average of 24 feet. There's a substantial elevation change from Fernald Point Lane from that elevation on the north to the south. So it may be that at the time that addition was permitted, that it did meet the height calculations and it was so found. It might be interesting to look at development on either side of this house. You can see that development is of the same scale and height. That shows the house to the directly to the west, and then the existing residence directly to the east, both of similar scale and mass and height.
So, in other words, if it meets the height calculations for the coastal zone, then the wording in Article 2, which says that it should be, that we limit them to 2 stories, becomes erroneous or not making a difference or not considered, I don't know how you want to say that, as long as the 3 stories can now be contained within the height limitation.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Gottstinker, Article 2 does not contain the same provisions as Article 4 of the Montecito zoning ordinance with that limitation on 2 stories. So that's not a basic limitation in this location. We're going to get the zoning ordinance in check, and I apologize that I wasn't prepared to address these questions in such detail.
I completely understand, because it's not part of this project. I wouldn't have expected you to be prepared to answer these questions. It's just I'm kind of trying to sort something out for myself here. Yeah. Thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant?
Do you want me to?
Okay, we're ready for public comment. Is there any public comment on this project? Public comment period is closed. The commission may go into deliberation on this project. Commissioner Tilsher.
Mr. Chair, do you want to take ex parte comment from the commissioners?
Visits.
As to visits.
Ex parte.
I guess we already did the visit.
We did the visit
Yeah.
one, I think.
I should add something to my comment then. Oh, I'm sorry. No, I covered it. Thank you.
All right. Okay, is there any further comment or deliberation with regard to this project before I ask for a motion? Is there a motion?
I can move, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Phillips?
I move that we adopt the required findings for the project specified in Attachment A of the staff report, including the CEQA findings, California Environmental Quality Act findings, that we accept the exemption included as Attachment B pursuant to Section 15303 sub E of the state CEQA guidelines, and finally to approve the project subject to the conditions included as Attachment C.
Is there a second to the motion?
I second the motion.
Mr. Chair, before you proceed, I would ask that the motion be amended to include the addition to that project description noting the portable spa in Attachment C. So,
As amended? Is that acceptable?
yes.
Do you need the case number recitation? No? We're good?
All right.
Thank you.
Is there a second?
I second the motion.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion is carried unanimously.
Mr. Chair, to answer Commissioner Gottstinker's question, I did look in Article 2, and the height limit in Article 2 in the 1E1 zone district is 25 feet. There's no reference to the number of stories, and it's not referenced in the overlay either.
There's no limitation on the number of stories,
No.
so long as that the height is
Right.
satisfied.
Now, right, and I do believe that the revised height calculation is going to make it extremely difficult for people to accommodate 3 stories in 25-foot height. So I think we're somewhat addressing it through that revised calculation as soon as it's adopted by the Coastal Commission.
Thank you, Secretary Blank. Secretary Villalobos, next item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The following is a hearing on the request of Bonnie Franklin to consider the Appeal 05 APL 33, appeal filed on December 12th of 2005 of the Planning and Development Department's decision to deny a coastal development permit.
This is going to be fun.
Ms. Peugeot?
Good morning, thank you. I have Alan Bell, the project manager for this case, with us, and he will be presenting the staff presentation on the project.
Thank you. Mr. Bell?
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. Again, for the record, my name is Alan Bell. I'm a planner with Development Review South. I'll be giving you a brief overview of our staff report that we distributed to you earlier. Just to point out a couple of things, however, to begin with, is that there are a couple of attachments that I'll be referring to. One is the revised application that the applicant submitted, and that's the basis of our project description and the basis of the denial that P&D issued. The second thing I'd like to point out is that this is an application for a home occupation, and there are requirements within Article 2 that must be met for home occupations, and I've included those in as attachment C. However, I would like to point out that in copying, one of the 11 criteria was omitted. So I do have a copy of the provisions directly from the ordinance for your referral. However, the one that was omitted is not applicable to this project. And then lastly, I'd just like to note that attachment E is standards from the state of California from the Veterinary Medical Board. And in essence, what we'll discuss is the fact that in order to operate a veterinary practice, the practice itself has to comply with certain standards. So we've included those standards in attachment E, and we'll refer to those. In summary, the applicant has applied for a coastal development permit for a home occupation which would consist of a small animal practice within a single family dwelling. And in particular, as presented by the applicant, the practice would take place in one room, the den of the single family dwelling. P&D reviewed the application and concluded that the proposed project did not comply with some of the 11 criteria for home occupations in Article 2. As a result, we denied the application, and then it was subsequently appealed by the applicant. I will make one note that since P&D issued its denial letter, and since the time of the staff report, the applicant has submitted additional information. Nonetheless, P&D's position is that the project should be denied and the appeal should be denied.
What is the nature of the additional information? Is that large folder that we received?
That's correct. That's largely the information that's been
With the
distributed.
photographs, etc.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Just by way of introduction, this slide shows the location of the property, which is north of Highway 101. It's essentially located between Olive Mill Road and San Ysidro Road. It's accessed off of San Ysidro Road, and the property actually exists on a small cul-de-sac. The property itself is within the coastal zone. It's designated as single family residential with a 20,000 square foot minimum lot area. The parcel itself is about 18,000 square feet, or about 4/10 of an acre. It includes a single family dwelling with an attached garage. As we mentioned, the zoning ordinance itself includes 11 criteria that has to be satisfied in order for P&D to approve a home occupation. We found that the application did not meet some of those applicable provisions. Specifically, there are 3 that we'll be discussing and focusing on today. First, we found that there was insufficient evidence to show that the den has sufficient room to accommodate the proposed veterinary practice. Second, we found that the dwelling is not the applicant's primary or permanent residence, and therefore the home occupation would not be conducted by an occupant of the dwelling. Third, neighbors raised concerns about the practice and how it would affect the residential character of the neighborhood. And in particular, issues were focused on traffic, noise, and safety. So what I'll do is just take a minute to go through these one by one. The standard is that in the provisions that were presented to you and handed out and are within the zoning ordinance itself, state that a home occupation shall be conducted within not more than one room of a dwelling. When we reviewed the application, we looked at the state standards for veterinary practices, and those standards require the practice to be conducted at a minimum of 2 rooms. They require a separate, essentially reception room, office room, and then a separate examination room. That conflict, in part, led us to deny the application. However, after we denied the application, we did receive information from the applicant stating that she had applied to the state for a premises permit for a veterinary practice and that she'd actually received that permit. In reviewing the project, the state found that that requirement for having at least 2 rooms didn't apply to this particular practice, and it issued a premise permit for the veterinary practice at the proposed location.
Can you elaborate on that?
Yes. Again, the state provisions state that they have minimum standards for fixed veterinary practices. And when we made our decision, we looked at those and we concluded that since the state required at least 2 rooms, an office or reception room and a separate examination room, that there was an inherent conflict between the state requirements and the requirements in the zoning ordinance that limit the home occupation to 1 room. So that was part of the basis of our denial. However, after we issued the denial letter, we found out, and the applicant informed us, that she had submitted an application to the state veterinary medical board and had actually received a veterinary premises permit to conduct this operation at the proposed location. And in effect, when I spoke to the state staff, they explained that those criteria, they have some latitude for interpreting those. And in this case, since it was going to be a practice of limited nature, that they would not require it to have 2 separate rooms, that it could operate in 1 room of the structure, that is the den. So therefore, that particular aspect is really not a conflict or an issue for us in terms of staff today. However, what is an issue is that the applicant has proposed to locate the proposed clinic within the den of the existing single-family dwelling. And based on this floor plan, you can see the den I'll highlight in red here. The concerns that we had is that when we looked at an actual floor plan and layout for the proposed veterinary clinic, we found that the room itself, that is the den, contains about 138 or 139 square feet. We looked at the layout as proposed by the applicant, and our concern and what led us to maintain our position is that this layout doesn't include some of the required equipment that's listed in her application. And some of those things, for example, include a freezer, they include oxygen equipment, they include anesthetic equipment, sterilization equipment. So we simply didn't have the information in front of us to conclude that with that additional equipment, which also would include running water, which is not indicated in this site plan, that there wouldn't be sufficient room to actually conduct the proposed practice within the den of the existing structure. Therefore, we found it would be inconsistent with the first criteria in the zoning ordinance.
Mr. Bell, would you go back to your previous visual
Yes.
that showed the whole house? Yeah, where is the entrance to that area from the outside? Is that the spot there?
Yes.
Okay.
And just for orientation purposes, the driveway or the street is located right here. And there is a driveway that leads to a short driveway from the street to the garage and then the entrance to the house.
So that any of the animals that are brought in come through that door? Is that right?
Presumably that would be the case. That may be something you will want to ask the applicant for clarification on.
Is there a opening between that entrance area and the kitchen? Is there a wall there, or is that just an opening?
That's something, again, it's a little hard to tell from this floor plan what are solid walls, but it doesn't appear there's a direct opening, but I can't tell for certain. That's something the applicant could explain.
Thank you. Commissioner Gostankis.
Yeah, going back to that same kind of conversation, is that as far as I can tell on the floor plan that you've got up there, there's no door indicated between the den and what's designated as the bath, and yet on the examination room floor plan, the next slide, there appears to be a door that goes to the bathroom. So the question for me now becomes, is that bathroom now, I mean, part of the veterinary thing or not? Or like, I mean, it's kind of weird for me to think about all these animals next to my bathroom, but that's my thing, you know. So I just, that access is a concern to me too.
Okay.
You know, whether that actually exists, because I've got two different drawings here.
Yes, it does appear that there's an inconsistency, and perhaps the applicant can address that directly.
Yeah.
You, as the planners, did not actually go to the site and walk through this building?
Originally, no. I have been to the site, but I've not been inside the dwelling itself.
Okay, this is kind of a tough one for me now.
Maybe you have the information, but where on that diagram it says safe, is that the area where the bathroom was?
No, I believe that this is
reversed here.
No, I believe that this is that this represents a closet, and that this would be essentially considered part of the den, as opposed to not being part of the.
So the bathroom would be to the left of that.
Correct. According to the floor plan that the applicant submitted, the bathroom would be located to the left.
Yeah, in that area.
In that area
Okay,
there.
well, we'll ask the applicant.
Okay.
Would you continue, please?
Thank you. The second issue that we addressed was based on the second criteria in the ordinance, which states, it's the third criteria. It says, home occupation shall be conducted solely by occupants of the dwelling. No other employees other than dwelling occupants shall be permitted on the premises for business purposes. In this case, when we made our decision, we knew that the applicant's mother actually owns this house and this property. We also understood that the applicant maintains a primary residence in San Ynez. We didn't have additional information to conclude that she was actually an occupant of this dwelling. It was our understanding that she visited the property several times a week and may have been staying there several nights a week, but we had no additional information. Therefore, we felt that we couldn't make this finding. Subsequent to denying the application, the applicant has submitted information showing that she has received mail at this address, that she has a driver's license that shows this is her address, and she submitted some other information that I believe you have received in the binders. Nonetheless, given the information that we have available right now, we simply couldn't make the connection between the information we had and finding that we had sufficient evidence to conclude that she was actually an occupant of this dwelling. That is, in the sense that this would be her primary residence, or that she is a permanent residence of this dwelling. Therefore, again, we found that we couldn't meet the third criteria and that it would be denied. The other issue is that we did pose this question to County Council. County Council is here today. We briefly discussed it this morning, and I understand Mr. Allen is available to answer any questions that you may have on that. The issue, or part of the issue might be, is that there is no definition of occupant within the ordinance itself. We did, in our staff report, include some applicable definitions from Webster's dictionary, and in part, that was the basis for our concluding that the applicant was not an occupant of the dwelling. The last issue that we'll touch upon, and I've listed these in order that they're presented within the zoning criteria itself, not in order of significance necessarily, but the last one has to deal with criteria number 10, And criteria number 10 states that a home occupation shall be strictly secondary and subordinate to the primary residential use and shall not change or detrimentally affect the residential character of the dwelling, premises, or neighborhood. When we initially reviewed this application, we received a considerable amount of input from concerned neighbors, and that included over 16 letters, some of a petition style, expressing concerns about the proposed use. Most of those concerns focused on issues related to traffic, issues related to safety, and issues related to noise. And just to give you a feeling for the neighborhood, this is a photograph looking essentially from the subject property down Greenworth Place. So you can see that it's a relatively narrow road, and right behind us again would be the house. Off to our right would be the cul-de-sac that I mentioned earlier. This is the subject dwelling. The garage would be located in the entranceway, are blocked by the palm tree in front of the house, but they would be located to the left. This is the cul-de-sac itself, and the area immediately in front of the house I'll just kind of highlight here, with the garage entrance being about where the laser pointer is now. Going back, again, there is the standard within the zoning ordinance itself under the home occupation criteria, which is listed as number 1. The other standard or other policy that we'd like to point out is within the Montecito Community Plan itself. Within the land use element, there's a provision that states to promote area-wide and neighborhood compatibility. Again, after reviewing the information we had available, we found that this would affect the neighborhood residential character for many of the reasons cited by the neighbors. We also received 2 letters from the Montecito Association. The most recent was dated September 14th and should be in the packet of information that you received. The Montecito Association recommended that the project not be allowed, in part because of issues dealing with neighborhood compatibility. I would like to acknowledge that, again, we have received some information from the applicant that addresses or attempts to minimize some of the potential effects of this project on the neighborhood. But nonetheless, we're maintaining our position that the project is not consistent with this provision. As a result, our recommendation today is that you adopt the required findings for denial, which have been included as attachment A, that you deny the project, and that you deny the appeal itself. And again, in terms of the findings, there are 3 that are applicable to a coastal development permit. We found that the project does not conform to the plan policies or the zoning criteria. We found that the property is a legal parcel. We documented that in our staff report. And then lastly, we'd just like to note that there are several building violations that exist on the property to the best of our knowledge, although we do understand that the applicant has taken some steps to remedy those and may have actually resolved those since we issued our staff report and actually to address those within the last few days. And with that, thank you.
Commissioner Tilcher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Bell, what were the building violations?
There were 2 building violations. One dealt with the garage, and our understanding from the building department is that the applicant installed a sliding glass door within the garage, within the rear of the garage, without permits. The second violation dealt with the construction of a fence that exceeded the 6-foot height limit and therefore required a permit.
Thank you.
Commissioner Gostenker.
Yes, I notice in the findings that need to be made for the home occupation that number 3 says, a home occupation shall be conducted solely by the occupants of the dwelling. No employees other than the dwelling occupant shall be permitted on the premises for business purposes. Do we know anything about, the conducting of the veterinarian business? I mean, certainly when I take my animals to the vet, it really is a 2-person job. to have somebody holding while veterinary is doing their thing. And so I'm just was wondering if you had any information as whether there were any employees intended or how this veterinary business was going to operate without the addition of a second employee.
This is a question I would recommend you pose to the applicant. However, we do understand that the applicant's mother resides in the dwelling and that she would provide some assistance to the applicant in conducting the business. The type of assistance provided wasn't clarified, whether it would be clerical or whether it would be some other type in nature.
Commissioner Phillips.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Did I interrupt you?
Go ahead.
No.
You go ahead. I'll get back to her.
Mr. Bell, counsel, is it proper for us to approve a coastal development permit when there are building violations on that property pre-existing? I mean, I'm thinking maybe we don't need to go any further than number 3. Is that true?
When, do you want to take it? Or?
Do we have the discretion to overlook pre-existing building code violations? Yeah.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Phillips, one of your findings is that the subject property is in compliance with all laws, ordinances, and so it is usual for, as you know, as a project comes forward to you, for the project applicant to either have corrected or as a condition of issuance of the permit that all building violations be corrected. So you could
condition it.
You know, condition it upon correction of the violations.
Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Gostenker?
Yeah, I want to go back to number 3. You know, we obviously at some point have to determine, well, we don't have to, but we most likely will be trying to determine who's the occupant here. So, but given what you said, which is why I jumped in really fast about the mother is an occupant. And then now in accepting this application, if we were to approve the application, we would then be saying that Ms. Franklin is the occupant, and I still can't then equate number 3 being that if the mother's the occupant, she's the occupant. If Ms. Franklin is the occupant, she's the occupant. So somebody is an employee here.
Mr. Chair and Commissioner Gostenker, you can have more than one occupant in a residence.
Okay, got it. That's what I was trying to sort out for myself here. Okay, thanks.
Any other questions for staff? Let's check the record of the commissioners on the visit to the site. Commissioner Tilsher?
I visited the site, and also I should add that I received a call from Mrs. Franklin several months ago, I imagine 3 or 4 months ago, where she was wanting to determine whether or not I felt there was room for an appeal. And I said that there appears to be three difficult issues against you. I said actually 3 strikes against you: the neighbors, the staff, and the Montecito Association. And I was not very encouraging about the appeal, but she did discuss it for, I think we had about a 45-minute conversation, so that was the gist of it, though.
Commissioner Phillips?
I visited the site, more the neighborhood, a sense of the neighborhood. I didn't enter the home.
Yeah, you're not allowed to. Commissioner Gostenker?
I attended the first Montecito Association meeting at which the applicant first brought this forward. I also received a call from her at some point asking me similar questions to what she asked Commissioner Tilsher, and I did do a drive-by of the site.
Bishop Berg?
I'm familiar with this neighborhood, and yesterday did another drive through the neighborhood, but I have not been in the residence itself.
Okay, I did visit the area, the neighborhood, and observed the house and the immediate structures around it, and I have a good sense of what the immediate neighborhood is like, as well as the street leading up to that particular area. Okay, I think we're ready for comments from the, or presentation by the applicant. You guys want to take a break? How many do we have?
Oh, okay.
I made, 7 copies. And then there was some sort of promo that you put this on. And that first he makes the pictures.
Good morning. My name is Bill Brastad, Bonnie's husband. I'd like to start off first by turning in this is final on the items that were in the building permit question. This has been finalized and signed off by the county. So I don't know if you'd like to see that, pass it through the board, or how you'd like to do that, but this is the paperwork regarding that.
Ms. Peugeot?
Mr. Chair, I know that staff received a distribution of this a day or so ago, so it may be that you have a copy in your file. It's a one-page item.
This was available this morning when we came in.
Okay, so we know that this is set. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Dr. Bonnie Franklin, and I'm a veterinarian. I've been a veterinarian for 12 years. I'm going to have my husband describe the neighborhood. He's better at that, and I will describe the practice. I want you to know that my family has lived in that house for almost 50 years. We've lived in that neighborhood longer than any other neighbor on Greenworth Place. So Bill will describe, and he can address the questions you had about the renderings that were given also. And second, I also want to say good morning. And I would like to say that I want to thank Mr. Alan Bell. He has acted in a very professional and courteous manner all through this proceeding, and the rest of the staff, but he's done a wonderful job, I think. Whether you approve this or not, he's still done a wonderful job. And I also have not requested anyone speak on my behalf. I don't want to waste your time, and I didn't want to waste people's time having coming in here. So what they did is they wrote letters, and you'll find those in the binder. And I just thought the written word would be just as mean as much as someone coming here, because we had thought that there would be a 3-hour discussion prior to this and another hour, and majority of these people are working or senior citizens. So thank you, and I'll turn over to Bill.
It appears that Mr. Bell's photographs are duplicates, and essentially for a lot of the things that we had. But I still would run quickly through, if we may here. The first photo, we don't need to show that one, but the second, if you would please. This is the layout of Greenworth Place. Excuse me, but the pointer. And the proposed area right here is where 1396 is. There's only 4 houses that access the street from this area. These other 2 properties that back up to this one, they enter from the other leg of Greenworth. So that points out the traffic issue a little bit there. The next one, please. This was just a size of all the lots in the neighborhood. The average of all of them is a half an acre. The 1396 is .042, and most of them are approximately the same size. However, the one at 1410 is 1 full acre. We've focused on the homes that are directly in the vicinity of our house because we couldn't see the correlation down the road of any issues since this was changed to the concierge type practice versus one where individuals came to the house. So we felt like we had handled the traffic issues at that point. The next one, please. This again is a view of the front of the house, and if you'll take note, these hedges that go along, this would go against the property that's at 1410 that entered off the other cul-de-sac. These are almost 30-foot tall hedges that run down the back of the property almost all the way to the end, or two-thirds of it, I would say. The next photo, please. This is another view of the front of the residence. The next photo, please. You can see the trees are pretty heavily filling in there with this palm and the oak and the ash tree there. And on your binders that you have, under the Greenworth Place heading, there's some photographs that we have that are, and these other items that we've shown here. There's a red arrow that points to the den. This is the area right in here where we would propose to put this. And as you can see, you can't see it from the street, and I have other photos down the road here that I'll show you that you can't see out of the windows either. So next one, please. Again, and this is the bathroom that we were talking about. Unfortunately, the door that you were questioning that enters here at the edge of the garage is right there where that red dot is, and the bathroom is in here, and this den room is in this area right here. You can almost see the window of the den in that area of the photograph. Next, please. This is a view from the driveway of the homes directly across the street, and this is, I believe, 1395 and I believe 1397. You see the garages are more forward and the residences are pushed back in the placement on the lots. I have another item I'd like to put up at this point. Actually, that one there. Thank you. There we go. I took a rangefinder, and well, if we could get rid of that, would be, or just move this down would be fine on there. Okay, thank you. And I measured from this area where the den is, from the area of the front wall of the residence where the den is, it's 49 feet to the beginning of this cul-de-sac. So for some of my measurements, I had to add this 49 feet and then do the range finding from this area here because it's so thick that you can't see through there. But these areas, from this den window to the residence across the street is 154 feet. The residence here at 1397 is 193 feet. The residence directly next door is 102 feet. The residence where that hedge line is that enters off Greenworth here, it's 177 feet. And this little wedge corner of the property that has this property that backs up to it is 189 feet. And the next two houses down the road, you can see 219 and 227. So these are not small lots with houses that are on top of each other by any means. I think this gives a good idea of just how far the residences are away from the location of this practice. So that, I think, will conclude my part for now. Some of these, by the way, this person here has given us a letter of recommendation toward this. And this 3-acre piece back here, we have a letter from them where they're in favor of it too. And that one, I believe, is 150 some feet also from here to that house that sits right back in here. So the closest one is this 102 feet with the neighbor that's to the west. This, by the way, is north up this way.
Commissioner Gostenka.
Excuse me, Mr. Franklin, will it be you or your wife that's going to go over the questions that I think a couple of us had about with regards to the discrepancy in the floor plans?
I can do that.
Okay, could we get those up there so that maybe we could get this clarified as to where the doors are and what entrance is what? And
This leaves a little bit to be desired, and I have to apologize for that.
so if you could explain, like whether that door, I think the question came up, whether that door is going to be used, whether there's a...
This is the door that would be used.
That is the door?
Yes.
So they'll go down that little alleyway or whatever
Right,
it
this
is
is a
in that
hallway,
door.
and there's a door here, and there's a door here that separates this room from the living room, and this door just closes off that hallway, and then there's a door right here for that bathroom.
So in other words, the floor plan, which I believe is the next slide, is as drawn is actually inaccurate because we've got a door that appears to go from the den into what I assume is the bathroom on this plan, but it was not on the other plan.
No, it was on the other plan. If you can flip back, I can show you that. This says door right here, and what's missing here is a line to show this hallway. No, I'm sorry. This is the door that you were referring to in the last...
No.
There's three doors.
Well, that's what I'm saying, is the two plans do not match up.
Well, I tell you what the problem is that second picture that he would just had up only shows the den itself and doesn't show the bathroom and the hallway. It was we just had that drawn for the actual area that we were using.
Alan, maybe you can flip to the next slide. Is this door to the bathroom?
Where is that?
No, the bathroom is over here.
What is that door to then?
That's the door to the hallway.
And then
Okay,
this
so
is
that's
door to
the hall going down
This is
there.
the hall going out, and right out here would be the door that exits the building.
So in other words, the other drawing is inaccurate then, because see, you've got the hallway running along the whole entire portion of the bathroom and then the den, but that's not actually. So you've got that wall drawn in there, the lower wall.
Yes, that's the bathroom.
No, but that dotted line continuing over. Is that a wall or not a wall? You've drawn it as though it's a wall.
You're right. You're right. That is not accurate. There shouldn't be. That should not be there.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. I thought you were talking about the door this whole time, and I couldn't.
Well, now I understand where that
Yes.
door is, but I couldn't compute where that door was,
I'm
given
sorry.
you had a wall drawn in there.
Right.
And I gather that from this diagram and your comments, that the wall, as you go down that hall to the door that enters into the den,
Yes.
to your left there is a continuation of a wall which separates that area from the kitchen. Is that correct?
Oh yes, this is a
That's
wall.
going to
right
be a
here.
solid wall
Yes. Yes.
there. There may be another door that goes into the kitchen from the hallway, but that's not relevant here.
Right.
Okay.
Right, this was the mistake. And if you put that next slide up, I can explain. This, in that bathroom that's not shown here, this is a closet that's in the den, and actually what's behind this right here is a shower from that bathroom. So that's how this space is afforded to the room, is that it essentially is left over in the bathroom because there's a shower stall there. So they put a closet in this area.
And then the upper door Right, that goes
into the living room.
Living room.
Excuse me, that goes into the living room, not the kitchen.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
I have an additional question here. I'm sorry, I did not get your name.
Bill Brastad.
Brastad?
Yes.
And you are the applicant's husband?
Yes, sir.
Are you an occupant of this premise?
I am part-time.
And did I understand correctly that the applicant owns another piece of property elsewhere?
Yes.
Are you an occupant of that property also?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Phillips?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Mr. Brassett, do you intend to use the garage in this practice?
No. No. The garage my mother-in-law has used on and off for doing artwork and things like that, and my brother-in-law 15 years ago put a sliding glass door in the back of the garage. That door was put in without a permit, and the door became very hard to open and close. So I just simply was going to replace the door with a new sliding glass door. I took the door out. Apparently, someone called in about illegal construction. They came out. I honestly didn't think I had to have the permit because I thought the door was already okay to be there. But as it turned out, it wasn't. So we went through the permit, and we have that signed off. And in fact, I put the old sliding glass door back in, so it's exactly like it was prior to this whole thing happening with that.
Will this practice pay a fee for the use of that room?
No. No.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Brastad? Okay, would you continue, please? Perhaps the applicant has more comments to make.
Just one here that I neglected to follow through on a photograph. I wanted to show where this, I think it's 17, Mr. Bell, please. And yeah, 17. I took a photograph of this vehicle that we proposed to use in this practice, simply just a standard minivan, and it's parked in front of the gate where we would be pulling it in, and then the next photograph, I'm sorry, there's one after that. It's completely out of sight from the street. So just trying to show there that this vehicle will not be even parked in the driveway. And I also point out the size of these hedges along in here too that are on the neighbor that's closest to us. So I'll let my wife continue on here if there's no more questions.
Commissioner Tilcher?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one quick question. You and your wife occupy the property periodically, several times a week, it sounds like.
Yeah, about four days a week.
Uh-huh. And does the applicant's, does your wife's mother, is she solely the owner on title of the property?
Yes, sir.
And are you solely the owner on title of the property in Santa Ynez?
Yes.
Thank you.
That property is entitled to me alone. My wife's name isn't even on that title. A deed.
Okay.
I just want to explain what I want to do and the reasons I want to do it. I know that the binders I gave you explains it in detail, but I know you have busy schedules and reading all that material may be a little overwhelming. Originally I wanted to set up I came to the county and actually they suggested you could set up a home occupation permit, and it's legal in the county to set up this veterinarian practice with a home occupation permit. And the neighbors, I went and spoke to the neighbors, and two of the neighbors expressed concerns regarding traffic. Then I went before the Montecito board, and many more than two expressed concerns about traffic. So I withdrew the application. And then I reapplied. Actually, a friend of mine who's a physician suggested, why couldn't you set up a concierge practice, which would be a practice where the animals are picked up in the morning, brought back to my house, examined, treated, and returned at the end of the day. So I reapplied with this in mind. And the reason I want to do this is my mother's older and in need of some help, and there's a prescription there from her physician talking about that. And I have a toddler, and I thought this is an important time in my life to be with my family, and there's a family need. And I really don't want to discuss that part in detail in public. So that's why I did it. And I had a mobile veterinarian practice called the Visiting Vet for 6 years. So I'm used to a mobile type practice. And for the last 3 years, since my daughter's birth, I have done what's called relief work and worked at one hospital part-time and done relief work, which means that I work at various hospitals, probably 15 different hospitals all throughout the county. So what I did is I realized why I was denied was that I didn't have a premise permit, which I actually didn't even know what a premise permit was until I read that. So I contacted you guys and spoke to you, and none of you, one gentleman, didn't discuss anything, and everyone else was not that encouraging, which was probably the right thing to do, because you were telling me it was, made sense not to appeal. But once I applied for my premise permit and the state of California granted it, then I felt like I should appeal. If you read through my application on the premise permit, I filled it out to the minute detail on what I wanted to do, and I talked to the state many times, and they approved it. I want to discuss one part. The first part is the size of the den. If we could, let me see. If you could, Bill never showed you pictures of looking out of the den. Let's show those really quick. Number 21, number 19. Actually, I'm sorry. Can you go back to number 11? These were just overlooked. And this, I just wanted to show you, this is the backyard looking to the west to the Greens property. And the Greens have written a letter of support for this clinic. And I just want to show you how there's no line of sight to our backyard. And if you could go to number 12, please. And this is another picture facing the Greens property. And number 13, please. This is facing the rear of the property where there's Wyman Road behind there, if you look on the map that Alan provided. And this is owned by the Ramstroms. They own both the properties, and they have also written a letter in there of support for the practice. And number 14, please. And this is another view from the back, and you see it's well shaded. And number 15, please. This is a property to the east, and these people have not written any letter of support, but their residence is accessed, like Bill said, from the other cul-de-sac on Greenworth Place. This is the rear of the property. And number 16, please. And this is another shot from the backyard. Sorry, and number 20 now, please. I just want to show you when you're standing in the den looking out the window out front. I just stood and took pictures. That this picture, you can just go through these out, 20, 21, 22, and 23. These are all just looking out the den window, and that's what you see when you look out. And And now if you could please go to number 25. So, actually, I'm sorry, 24, sorry, just a little nervous up here. This is the original one that you were talking about, the doors and so forth. Oh, what do you put this? Oh. This is a rendering that was done, and I read the letter from Montecito saying it was 138 square feet. It's actually 139.2 square feet. And this is where I would do the practice. And if you could go to number 25, please. And as I said before, I had a mobile practice for 6 years called the Visiting Vet. And this is what I practiced in. This is a rendering of the mobile hospital. You see it's 97 square feet. In this hospital, I had a full service hospital. What I want to do on Greenworth Place is not a full service hospital. It is examinations, treatments, and minor procedures, no overnight stays, no critical care, no animals will be boarded there whatsoever. When I had this hospital, I did full-on surgeries here. I had everything in this unit except x-ray. So could you please go to the next number? You have these, I provided these for you because it's kind of hard to see up on this slide, but this is how the stuff was arranged in my mobile van. And I had a driver who was with me all the time, and half the time I had a technician. I had the technician when I had major surgeries, or sometimes when you have a mobile practice and you go to someone's home and their cat's under the bed, you need help getting it out, and that was not uncommon. And you have mean biting dogs that people can't bring to the vet. There's a lot of situations where it's a different world, the mobile practice. But so I had a technician, and the clients would come into the hospital. So there could be 3 to 4 people in here. Typically there was 3 or 2, and you see that the floor space is 97 square feet. And if you could go to number 27, please. And this slide just gives you an idea of how things were stored. And number 28, please. I no longer have my mobile unit, but this is a generic unit that's just like the one that I drove. 29, please. And these are just photos, and I've provided those for you also of the inside of the mobile hospital. 30 and 31, please. And you can see here, could you stop there for 1 second? Right up here are cat cages, and down here where you cannot see are dog cages. They are not in the line of sight. They do not see each other. There's no barking. There's no conflict. The dogs are side by side. They don't see each other, and they don't see the cats. And the next one, please. And this is just another shot of the inside of the hospital comparable to mine. So I know that people have expressed concerns about barking dogs and odor. If you think back, I know you were discussing when you go to the vet. If you think back when you go to a veterinarian's and you are there for an examination, if you hear barking dogs, and I will tell you, you most likely do not. If you hear a barking dog, it's primarily when 2 clients are in the reception room with 2 dogs. They want to get together as friends, and the dogs don't want to be friends, and there's barking between the dogs in the reception room. But when you're in a veterinarian hospital, there is not barking going on in treatment areas or in the back of the hospital. In a boarding facility, there is. In a grooming facility, there is, because dogs are placed right next to each other, standing there, visual contact, and they get upset with each other and they bark. But there isn't a problem with barking. And I have letters, if you look in the very back, there's of this binder under veterinarian support. There are 3 letters there. One is from Dr. Marvin Prentice's widow, and they had a practice for 32 years. out at Fairview Shopping Center, and they never, but that was not in a residential area. That was in a shopping center, but they never had complaints about odor or barking. The other 2 letters, one is from Tom Thompson, who owned Adobe Animal Hospital in 2 locations on State Street. You can read through that letter, but summing it up, he put that in residential area, both practices, one for 10 years, the next one was for 20 years, which is still there, and I have some photos of it. And when he initially did that, clients were very concerned about noise, and those clients that were concerned became his customers. He had no complaints in all those years. The third is from a place where I do relief work on occasion, but it's in Aurora Grande. I realize it's out of the county, but it is literally in a tract house, in a tract neighborhood. They've been there 25 years. They went through similar to this to get started, and in those 25 years they've never had a complaint. And those letters you can peruse. They're in the back of your binders there. I want to emphasize that those hospitals are all full-service hospitals, which means that they do every procedure: orthopedic surgery, full diagnostics, x-ray, overnight boarding, critical care. That is not what I want to do. I want to do this on a part-time basis, I want to do it on a limited basis, and I want to do it on a temporary basis. I want to have the ability to be with my family. It means a lot to me. This is not a full-service hospital. Any animal that needs critical care, any animal that's contagious, any animal that needs full diagnostics will be referred to a care facility on Haley Street, which is open 24 hours a day, which is a referral hospital. And that also is in my application to the state. There was also concerns, a neighbor had said at a Montecito meeting that I was going to bring SARS into the neighborhood, which is not really possible, but concerns with their children and their pets getting diseases. I didn't know how to prove the negative, so I contacted the California State Veterinarian, who is the veterinarian. The state veterinarian wrote a letter saying that it's very minimal. That is in your binder. He said, I would put that it's impossible, but I can't put that, so all I can put is very minimal. And you will find it in your binder also. Let me see. Sorry, I'm getting lost here for 1 second. I want to also, if you could please put up slide number 32. The other thing that was brought up is that I was trying to set a precedent, and I think that that precedent's been set way before I'm standing here. This is a hospital where I actually work every Saturday, and it's St. Francis Pet Hospital. It is a converted house in a neighborhood. Bill, you were going to go through this. You want to do this? All right. It's a converted house in a neighborhood on the corner of Ortega and De La Vina. It's been there 25 years, and they do not get any complaints of barking or odor. And you talk about residences within 100 feet. These residences are within 15 feet. If you could move ahead in those, please. There's a series of them here.
Dr. Franklin, may I remind you that what we're talking about here is the Montecito community area and not the city, so that the conditions and compatibilities that we're concerned about are those that apply to Montecito and not to the city of Santa Barbara.
Well, then that's my mistake. I thought my denial was from the county, so I took pictures of all the hospitals that are in residential areas within the county itself.
Yeah. Well, they're not directly applicable here.
Well, I'd like to show just one other picture then. They're you can find them in the binder, but one photo I would like to show is number 38, which is not in Montecito, it is in the county. To show you that there's hospitals that are actually in a tract house in a neighborhood, and here they're actually treating the animal in the front yard. So if you are interested, there is a section, actually a separate binder with the ones in the county. That's my mistake. I thought you wanted things that were also in the county. So that those don't need any more of the slides. But now I'd just like to discuss, I never really thought I'd have a problem with the residency in my discussing residency. So what I have done is provided documentation, which is also in your binders there. We have belonged to Mount Carmel Church since the 1960, and there's a letter there from the priest. I prefer that if you read it. I don't really want to read it in public, but my driver's license, my voter registration, auto registrations, utility bills, personal mail, other supporting documents. What I did is I contacted the DMV, I contacted Santa Barbara City College, I contacted UCSB, and I asked them, what do I need to provide to this commission to show my residency? And they told me, and I provided that documentation plus more. Finally, regarding support, I have provided within this binder at the beginning support of the neighbors. The Ramstroms behind the property have written the letter. There's a letter from the people to the west. There's a letter from people down the street, Mr. Arnold. There's a letter from the Bears over by La Vereda. Community support, you can read multiple letters. There's a letter, you can contact the fire marshal, Jim Langhorn, and he supports it, says it's a good idea. There are signatures. I've written the list out of signatures of people that have signed. The first signatures are people that are primarily residents of Montecito, like Mrs. Nancaro, and it goes down the list. There's signatures from a client of mine as a physician. He got signatures from medical professionals stating that this would be an attribute for them because they're busy set schedules. I also have a master's in wildlife biology, and I do work for the Forest Service. And the Forest Service started their own petition, and they also have signatures in here. You can read that petition. A client who's a senior citizen, she did another petition. Their senior citizens have signed. And finally, well, not finally, then I sent out cards to clients. I sent out 500 cards. I received approximately 200 back. I put copies of some of them in there, and in there are the rest of them. And I would say approximately 100 of them were just returned because I haven't practiced in 3 years in my mobile practice, so the people had moved. And there's support from seniors, handicapped people. People really think it's a great idea, this concierge practice, and would help them out. People even have written that they wouldn't mind it in their own neighborhoods. Whether they live in Montecito or not, they don't. I don't know where they live. You'd have to look at the return address. Then finally, a client on her own had paid and had a survey done, and you'll see that under marketing research, where they went outside pet stores and other facilities that dealt with animals and seen what the response of a concierge practice would be in Santa Barbara. And 79% of the people surveyed thought it was a great idea. Their comments were, it's equivalent to my child being bused to and from school, great service for anyone who works full-time. My mother-in-law's housebound would love this service. It's a convenience I would support since I am disabled. It's a great idea. So there is a lot of support from the community, and that's documented also in here. The final thing I'd like to, emphasize is that this is not, I do not want a full-service hospital. This is a part-time hospital, a limited scale. No clients come to the house. No clients be privy to the address. There's no van with any markings on it. It is just the van that you saw. There is no signage on the outside of the building, and legally there doesn't have to be. On the answering machine, it would refer everyone to Care Animal Hospital, and on the invoices, it would refer people to Care Animal Hospital. There was something else that I guess I had addressed it. I think Alan addressed it. The 2 rooms were that there was an examination room and a reception room. There are no clients, so there's no reception room. And I just want to emphasize that this is not, the amount of traffic that I would be incurring would be driving my van to pick up the animals, bring them back, drop them off, and come back home. So if you consider that my mother doesn't drive, and that most of the people in this neighborhood have children of driving age, there's very few young children. My child and I think 2 other in the neighborhood are young kids. All the other kids are older. Most of these families have 2 to 3 cars. They have maids, they have gardeners, they have assisted care. They go to the grocery store. They're driving a lot more than we are. So the traffic issue really doesn't make much sense to me at this point. It made perfect sense when I wanted to put a practice that people came, and that's why I withdrew the application. But the amount of traffic, and I saw in the Montecito letter that they had written that the laboratory pickup, that's not happening. As I did for 6 years with my mobile practices, I take the lab samples and I drop them at another hospital, and they are picked up daily by a big lab called Antec at the other hospital. There's no lab pickups or drop-offs. There's no people coming. There's just this van twice a day up and down. And I really can't see as that, this is one car. This is a one-car household. And I stay there. We own a house in San Ynez. We own a ranch. I am stay at my mom's. She needs help, and you can see from that prescription, approximately 4 days a week. And I'd like to be able to make a living and do what I do and to be with my family. And that's it. Thank you for your time.
All right. I have, Dr. Franklin, I have a couple of questions with regard to this question of occupancy.
Okay.
According to the record, this house that you're proposing to use is about 2,300 square feet. Mm-hmm. That's what the record says. My understanding is that your mother is a full-time occupant of that house.
Yes, for almost 50 years our family's been there.
Is there any other? Is there a father also? You have
My
another
father passed away a number of years
so
ago.
she's the full-time occupant.
Yes. And one thing I wanted to mention, when they talked about a person working for me, my mother is not going to be restraining animals. What I did is I wanted my mom to, she's a senior citizen, and she did with my mobile practice. She helps with the computer to mail out reminder cards, and I'd give her a little bookwork. And it's not a paying salary job. It's a job that she does well and she enjoys doing, and it keeps her active. And that's all there is to it. I don't have an employee. She lives there.
Okay. You have indicated that you spend some of your time there, and your husband has indicated that he also spends some of his time there.
Not as much as I do. He doesn't.
I'm having a little difficulty identifying you as an occupant. You are a person who uses the facility, but not so much as an occupant. Do you have all your personal effects in that
I have
premise?
a whole bedroom there, the other bathroom with all my stuff. My daughter has a crib there. She has all her toys there. Yes.
And I presume that you have a matching set or a comparable set at your other
yes.
Establishment. Okay. So,
can I state one more thing? We have been away. Nobody, if I have a feeling neighbors are going to come up and say nobody's there, nobody's there. We have been out of the past 8 months. We have been to Africa, and we took a trip to Ireland, and we took a trip to England. And during that time, my mother stayed in San Francisco with my sister, because not staying alone. And then recently, we took an extended trip to the East Coast with bringing my mom with us. So there hasn't you can see that one of these, this was postponed because we were out of the country then. But a lot of times the house has been vacant. In the past 6 months, we've done a lot of traveling.
okay. There was another question here. Commissioner Gossanker.
Yes. How many animals do you expect to treat in a day?
That's all up to me, and it's all up to what's wrong with them. I know that sounds silly, but if you called me and said, I have 3 cats, and they're healthy, but they all need to be vaccinated. Well, but if you call me and say, I have one cat and he's really acting tired, he's 17, he's crying, he's losing weight, that cat's going to take quite a bit longer of time than the vaccine cats. So it really depends on what's wrong with the animal, and I can give you a guesstimate, but it depends. I would say probably 5 animals in a day would be about the average.
That would be the average?
Well, I think that would be about what I would treat. Some days it may be fewer. Some days if someone has 3 cats that need to be vaccinated and they're all in one carrier, there may be those 3 cats and there may be 4 more cats. That may be it. Or there may be those 1 cat and 2 dogs. Or there may be, I would say that 5 people, 5 animals, yeah.
And then I think you just previously stated that your customers, the owners of the animals, will not have access to the address of this property?
No.
When you take their animals?
No.
So there wouldn't be any,
And
they wouldn't just have
No.
given that they wouldn't know where the animals
No.
are.
And they'd be used to that, because when I had my mobile practice, I would pick these animals up and I would do surgery. And I would take the mobile unit away and spend the whole day doing surgery and return them at the end of the day.
And you expect to be doing no surgery on site?
No, I didn't say no surgery. No aseptic surgeries. I will do dentals, like cleaning of teeth, removing small skin masses.
And you can do
that.
You can do that with no one to restrain the animals?
Yes. Well, the anesthetic restrains the animals. You give them injections and then the anesthetic.
Right, I understand.
Yeah.
I have a lot of animals.
Yeah.
Okay. I think.
But there are no aseptic surgeries, which means that where you would need a sterile surgery room, and none of that's going to be.
Okay, well, that actually does lead me on to my other question. In your presentation, you told us a lot of what you're not going to do, but you did not exactly spell out what you are going to be doing.
I will gladly spell out what I'm going to do.
Thank you.
I will examine the animals. I will do what's called a workup on the animals, which will, taking their signalement, their history, and what the problem is. When these animals, before they are picked up, the people will be emailed or faxed or on the phone, fill out a questionnaire that will answer a lot of questions that I typically ask when I see, if you came into my office, there's a series of questions that most vets ask you no matter what you're there for. I will ask those questions in writing or on the phone. I will examine the animals. If they need blood drawn and blood tests, I will draw the blood. I will medicate the animals if they need anesthesia and a dental done, if they have small skin masses they need taken off, if they had a small laceration, if they have a foxtail in the ear or a foxtail in the nose. I'm sorry, I'm just trying to think of all. Dogs come in with torn toenails. I know that sounds silly, that you fix their toenail. A dog with arthritis, I would do a neurological exam and medicate them. That's the type of thing. I'm not going to be taking a dog's spleen out. I'm not going to be doing orthopedic surgery. All that stuff would be referred to care.
Right. So what I'm gathering from the list is this is like some kind of interim between grooming and ongoing kind of care that's needed for animals and major veterinary practice. This is like a slot kind of in the middle there.
You know what I think that you could think of it as, which sounds weird, like an urgent care, where people go to an urgent care because they have the flu or they're sick, but they don't go to urgent care, for a surgery, I mean, I do those.
Well, yeah, that's.
I don't know how to explain
yeah.
it, but urgent care, not in the sense it's an emergency care, but it's just a facility. Yeah, I don't like the analogy towards grooming. I'd like to move away from the grooming, but yes. I understand.
I'm not saying you were doing grooming. I'm saying that this is a slot between when you take your dog to get groomed,
yes,
or you take your dog to a major veterinarian for a major operation.
Yes.
then
Yes.
there's an area between those two.
This
And
is
that's
also-
the sort of what you're addressing.
Exactly. Like
Okay,
if
thank you. I think I have the
Okay,
information I
okay.
need.
Commissioner Tilson.
Thank you, Chairman McGridley. Mrs. Franklin, I've had 14 dogs in my adult life, and I've never been fortunate enough to have a dog that didn't bark. And my question is, serious question, if you have 4 or 5 dogs, at the end of the day, you've got 1 or possibly 2 dogs that still have a problem. You haven't been able to finish the day with them, or they still have some kind of a problem. You really need to keep them overnight. Isn't it realistic that you're going to keep them overnight?
Absolutely not.
You're going to take them back to the client?
Absolutely
And then
not.
get them again the next day?
No, they would be taken to CARE, CARE is a facility on Haley Street. It's open 24 hours a day. It is a referral hospital. That is where I work on Saturdays. Every animal that I see on Saturdays referred at a major hospital is referred to CARE because there's no one there on Sunday or Saturday night. Absolutely not. First of all, I wouldn't do it because it's not within the plan. But secondarily, professionally, you do never keep an animal overnight in a facility where you don't have the monitoring equipment and the staff to observe the animal all night long. I have a child, I have a mother, I'm not going to be there watching the animal, sitting in the room with the animal, and I can't legally do that, but you send it to somewhere where it will be taken care of, which you would send it to CARE. And the other thing is I would never take 5 dogs in one day. Never. It would be a combination of some cats and dogs. 5 dogs is a lot of dogs, unless they were little Chihuahua dogs, but most people in Montecito have big dogs. They just seem to have larger dogs than smaller
Okay.
dogs.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions for the applicant? Commissioner Phillips?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dr. Franklin, in the schematic, the sketch of your office, how many cages are in there? Do you recall?
I know exactly. There are
5?
there's 4 big cages along the wall. And on the top, there, for the cat, maybe you could show me that one. I have it right here.
1, 2, 3, 3.
Well,
4.
that end one is a smaller,
Mhm.
oh, wait a minute. This is a smaller cage, like for a Chihuahua, Bichon, little guy.
Are these are mobile? These go
Yes,
in and out of the truck?
Yes. And the animals would be brought in a cage. You're not going to be walking through, and no cats would be picked up unless they're in a carrier. So
So you say 2 trips a day. At the beginning of the day, you have arrangements with these pet owners to come and get the pets.
Yes.
At the end of the day, you bring them back.
Yes.
You had talked about, with your mobile practice, the need to have someone help you with the cat under the bed. You're going to need help as well, and you have a problem with an employee.
No, because with this practice, I will not pick up an animal, a cat, unless it is in a carrier when I get there. I treated animals in people's homes. I would go into someone's house and they'd say, I don't want to treat them out there in your mobile unit. I want you to come in the house. I treated animals on beds, on kitchen tables, wherever. This practice, I would require that the cats would be in a carrier or we would not pick them up.
Does your daughter go to school in Santa Ynez?
My daughter goes to a preschool in Santa Barbara.
In Santa
and
Barbara?
the county asked me to provide that information, but I am not going to.
I don't need the
because
address.
it's public information and I don't really want it disclosed.
No, I'm just getting to...
She's she's too young for school.
I see. I have a problem with the ordinance occupancy requirement and the noise requirement. And I would hate to approve this use for you with the condition that if a neighbor hears barking, you're out of business, because I just can't see how you're going to avoid it. And it's right there. Create noise, audible beyond the boundaries of the premises. Could you make a living with just a cat practice?
Yeah, I could.
I wonder if your neighbors may have less of a problem with that. I'm not asking you
You'd
for
have
an
to ask
answer.
the neighbors.
Yeah.
They have a
It's
problem
just
with a lot of things.
just
I
a
don't know.
hypothetical. What else did I want to ask you? I think that's it. Thank you, Doctor.
Let me continue with the questions that were just asked. You show several pet carriers there. Does that imply that at any one time there may be more than one animal in your facility?
Yes. Up to 5.
Simultaneously?
Yes.
So is there a possibility then, under those circumstances, that there would be some vocal exchange between the animals?
No, I'm telling you, it doesn't happen in a vet hospital. These animals are in this carrier. Their line of sight is this way. If you're examining a table, there's a screen you put up right here, so they can't see each other and they can't see the table. There's a screen right here. They don't see what you're doing.
Or sense each other?
No, it's not like that. It isn't like territoriality where they're at your own home. I deal with it every day for 12 years. I'm in treatment rooms. Treatment rooms all over America have animals confined. You treat them, you leave them in the treatment room, you observe them when they're recovering from anesthesia, you observe them as in the treatment room prior. You look at a dog to see which nostril he looks like he's sneezing out of. You watch animals. That's what you do. For foxtails, you know, which foot is he licking?
Okay, I understand.
They're in there. I do it all the time.
You answered that question. Commissioner Tilsher, you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm trying to think, maybe you can help me a little bit. Your primary reason for doing all this, and you've done so much preparation, I can really empathize a little bit with your desires and how much work you put through, but your primary reason for doing this is to be close to your mother. It's not to make a living. It sounds like you can make a living.
Well, it's my profession. I want to be with my family at this time in our lives, yes. And I also am good at what I do, and I like what I do. So I would like to do both, yes.
But you've always made a living with either the mobile practice or assisting in vet clinics?
Yes.
Working for other doctors? And
yes.
It seems so hard for me to understand how you can make this a living.
I don't make the primary living in my family. My husband does.
So it's more of does it allow you to any tax write-offs on the house?
No. No.
It just kind of allows you to have a reason to go there more often, or?
No.
I mean,
it allows me not to work in another location and to have my daughter be in preschool that day because I have to work somewhere else, and my mom to be by herself. It allows me to be there with them, and my daughter doesn't suffer at preschool. She would enjoy that. Right now she goes a couple days a week, but my mom needs help, and my mom, it allows me to be there. It is not, that's why.
but you could be working downtown in some of the other vet clinics.
I'm not home when I'm working downtown. I'm not home. I'm gone.
Yeah.
I'd be gone from 7 in the morning to sometimes 7 at night. That's 12 hours. That's a long day.
So you wouldn't make it over to the house?
Well, if I'd make it over to the house, it might be during lunch where I would race over and race away. No, that, and I also do consulting work for the government, right? Environmental assessments I have a master's in wildlife biology. So a lot of that I do at the house. So, but that's not my profession. You know, this is what I do, and I enjoy doing.
Okay, thank you. I just kind of trying to understand it a little bit better. Thank you.
I know.
Are there any other questions from the Commission? Thank you very much.
thank you.
Dr. Franklin. I think we'll take a break now, and then when we return, we'll have public comment. I have about a dozen speaker requests here. All right, the first speaker will be Victoria Green, to be followed by Robert Collector. You want to invert those? All right, you're inverted.
Thank you, Chairman McGreblian, and good morning, Commissioners. I'm Robert Collector, President of the Montecito Association. I appreciate your letting me make remarks first. Normally, I will make relatively general remarks, knowing you've read the two letters. Victoria will follow me and speak in greater detail about the land use findings that she feels must be made to either support or deny the appeal. I wanted to begin by saying that Ms. Franklin was kind enough to come and present the project about a year ago to the Montecito Association. As you saw by our letters, we were unable to support this for a variety of reasons. Traffic was one of them, but make no mistake, traffic wasn't the essential reason. So whether or not it's a single van or 20 cars, it's irrelevant to us. First and foremost, we had issues with the occupancy question, as you did. When we saw Ms. Franklin a year ago, it was, by her testimony then, 6 months before she and her husband took these exotic trips. And a year ago, her neighbors all came in and said that they very seldom saw Ms. Franklin at the location. So our definition as an association of occupancy, I think, is a little bit different than Ms. Franklin's. We feel also that the community plan is pretty clear in terms of definitions of what are acceptable in zone districts. We would feel that it would be a slippery slope to approve this appeal based upon their definition of neighborhood compatibility. As this commission knows, currently we are studying, the association, the MBAR, what neighborhood compatibility means. We don't feel it means a project fits in a neighborhood because it's compatible with a house next door and behind it and one up the street. We would caution that making a finding of compatibility based upon their analysis would be faulty. I think that we too are familiar with the neighborhood, and we don't find this kind of hospital compatible in our neighborhood. And finally, and most importantly, beyond the occupancy issue, we think that our community plan is very, very clear on home occupations, home business is very, very clear. And our fear would be this. We did not find Ms. Franklin the most credible applicant who came before us. We would caution that asking the neighborhood to bear the burden, should there be barking, should there be needles, chemicals, medicines, anything attendant to a hospital that could be loosed into a neighborhood, asking the neighborhood to bear the burden and ask for enforcement after it's a fact is unfair. And I believe that the framers of the community plan knew this. That's why they were specific in their definition of what was a commercial enterprise. And I think it's a noble idea, and it could likely fit in a ton of places in Santa Barbara or even in Montecito if they're commercially zoned. But I think that the definition, at least to us, is very clear about what fits in a neighborhood, what doesn't fit in a neighborhood, and we would hate to see on something that's health related be allowed and then become a burden on the neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Green, to be followed by Sally Hanseth.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this morning. I'm Victoria Green, and I'm representing the Montecito Association today. I think that whenever you're considering a commercial use in a residential neighborhood and within a residential zone, you need to look very, very carefully at that proposed use, the scope of the use, how it would affect that surrounding neighborhood. And one concern, that I had when I first looked at this was, is a veterinary clinic a use that even is appropriately considered as something that can be authorized through a home occupation permit? And I would submit that from my review of Article 2, the applicable zoning ordinance here, that it really isn't. Where you do see the closest thing to an animal clinic, which I think they call a small animal hospital, in Article 2, allowed is within the commercial zone districts and only with a conditional use permit. So to me, it seems to kind of turn things upside down to suggest that something that requires a CUP in a commercial zone could be allowed in a residential zone with only a home occupation permit. So that's kind of the first test I had a hard time getting past. If you can get past that test and you do find yourself reviewing the home occupation permit required criteria, in effect findings that need to be made for staff to approve a home occupation permit, I think that there continue to be problems. We've talked about occupancy of the house. From my review of the materials, I have concern, and also my experience as a pet owner, taking my pets to the vet more times than I would like to have, that it's hard to imagine how this business would function with only one employee, the veterinarian. I know from both of my 70-pound dogs, for different reasons, require 2 people to administer vaccinations. One to hold the animal and the other to administer the vaccination. I'm not sure if, Dr. Franklin would be carrying a 70-pound dog in a crate into the den. I would think those dogs would probably have to walk. And that raises some issues, I think, for the neighbors with respect to compatibility. I think bottom line, what these issues indicate is that there is a problem with the compatibility of this type of use in a quiet residential neighborhood, and for those reasons, we are recommending that you deny the appeal and uphold staff's denial of the home occupation permit. And I think that it would be worthwhile as well for you to go on record as in stating that there are certain types of uses that perhaps are not appropriately permitted through the home occupation process. I think unfortunately in Article 2, when you read the home occupation permit section, it's not really clear enough in terms of what, it's almost you could do anything if you can find for these criteria, and that seems kind of wide open to me, and maybe if that were narrowed in the future, it would help weed out some of these things that maybe shouldn't even come down this road. Do you have any questions?
Commissioner Phillips.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Green, I'm looking at number 5 in the findings required for the home occupation permit, and it says there shall be no more than 5 customers, patients, Would you have the same testimony if Dr. Franklin was picking up people and bringing them there? Would your testimony be the same? It looks to me that patients of some kind are envisioned by this ordinance. Is it the animal issue or the medical issue that is troublesome, do you think?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Phillips, yeah, it does anticipate some kind of patients or clients. My neighbor gives piano lessons. So I think it's what this is intended to do is to limit the amount of traffic. I think that's what provision 5 is for.
Well, here we have people showing up, which is not the case, but...
Right, so patients, would an animal, I think in this case they qualify as a patient. One thing we had suggested previously to staff, if this were approved, was that there be a clear limit on the number of animals that were served on any given day. And the other thing I neglected to point out is that the veterinary premises permit that was submitted to the state on this question of number of employees indicated that there would be 1 licensed veterinarian and 1 lay assistant. So, I'm continuing to question that. I don't know if that's just for bookkeeping purposes or whether that is, more for technical assistance.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because lay assistant, another choice would be clerical administrative, which sounds like what your mother's fulfilling.
Thank you, Ms. Green.
Just a moment. I want to ask staff if they would like to comment on your citation of the Article 2 and the small animal hospital matter that Ms. Green has commented on.
I think what Mrs. Green was pointing out is that if you go through Article 2 and look where essentially animal hospitals are allowed, they do show up under commercial uses. And they typically do, as Ms. Green pointed out, require a CUP. I think the distinction is, in this case, that what she also pointed out is that when you get into the home occupations, there's no list of uses that accompany that. Basically, you have to meet the definition of home occupation, which there is a definition, and you have to meet the 11 criteria. So that's the issue that is essentially laid out in terms of the ordinance itself.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, I'd also add that when it comes to home occupations, primarily it's a measure of the scale of the business and the location of the business and then who runs the business. That's really the measure rather than the exact type of enterprise. The definition of home occupation in the ordinances actually starts out with the phrase a commercial activity, and then it goes on to say conducted in a room of the house or the dwelling or something like that. So it's really a matter of scale when we look at home occupations.
Counsel, do you wish to speak?
Mr. Chair, amplifying on staff's comments, I'd say for that reason, since commercial uses are anticipated and they're limited and there's no limitation to any particular uses, it would be not appropriate to attempt to exclude any particular type of use.
Yeah, and a comment has already been made that there's no list of what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. Any other questions for Ms. Green? Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Next speaker is Sally Hanseth, to be followed by Frank Sales.
These are letters for you and plot maps so that you can see where everybody lives that's going to speak. Good morning. My name is Sally Hanseth, and I live at 1410 Greenworth Place. My family has lived next door to the Franklins for about 45 years. I have been a real estate agent in Santa Barbara for almost 20 years, and I know from personal experience that the property values of the homes in our area will be negatively affected by the granting of a permit for the operation of an animal clinic in our neighborhood. I have included letters from two very respected agents in our community giving you their opinion on value, and they agree that it would absolutely drop the value of all of our properties there. By law, upon listing a property, the seller and all agents involved would have to disclose that the presence of an animal clinic on our street, they would have to disclose the presence of an animal clinic on our street to any prospective buyers. It is clear that just having to notify a potential buyer is going to have negative impact. No matter what the Franklins say this clinic is, the buyer will have a very negative impression. This is not a typical Montecito neighborhood. We live in a tight, narrow, private lane where the properties are bunched close together and the width of the road is at some points only 11 feet wide. Regardless of how this animal clinic is labeled or run, I ask the panel to imagine if you yourself were considering buying a very expensive home in this Montecito neighborhood, and the listing agent tells you that next door there's an animal clinic. What would your response be? In closing, I just feel that it's inappropriate to have this business operating in our neighborhood, and I'm firmly against it. Thank you.
A question?
Oh, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Hanseth, why would you feel compelled to disclose the existence of Ms. Franklin's business?
Well, I think
in the course of a real estate transaction.
Well, they say by law that you need to disclose any kind of nuisance, whether it's a neighbor that has barking dogs or peacocks, if there's a preschool that's a block away, if there's a creek, even if it doesn't border your property, if it's in the neighborhood, you need by law to disclose these things.
So noise factor
Yes.
or
Traffic.
safety issue or something like that?
Right. Whether it's a daycare or a fire station or whatever it is, you need to disclose.
Thank you.
So, thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Frank Sales, to be followed by Greg Huglin.
I'm actually Doreen Sales. I'm representing both my husband and I today. We are one of the newest neighbors in the neighborhood, and I'm just confirming we would not have bought in this neighborhood had we known there was a veterinarian's office, as we do have 2 small children under the age of 5, and also in front of their property is the end of a cul-de-sac, which we ride our bikes and toys and wagons, and it would have definitely made our decision different. So, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Huglin, followed by Dr. Denver. Huglin's address.
Hello, my name is Greg
Let me see
Huglin,
that
and
Huglin
I've
right here.
lived at 1427 Greenworth Place since 1969. I attended Santa Barbara High School with Bonnie Franklin. I have met her mother, Ronnie, who lives at 1396 Greenworth Place. I very much sympathize with Bonnie wanting to spend more time at her elderly mother's house, but I feel that operating an animal clinic in our residential neighborhood is inappropriate and a serious detriment to my wife, our 2 preschool children, and my enjoyment of our neighborhood. I believe that the purpose and intent of our local home occupations ordinance says, quote, "The intent is to prevent any adverse effects on the residential enjoyment of the surrounding properties." Even though our local ordinances do not specifically prohibit an animal clinic, many other California cities have explicitly recognized that veterinary clinics are inherently not compatible with a residential neighborhood. I spent some time on the internet and found 19 California cities that have existing ordinances specifically prohibiting home occupations such as veterinary clinics and kennels. I've got a bunch of examples up there in the document I just gave you, along with the ordinances and the pieces of paper that I downloaded from the internet, and I won't bore you with the entire list of them, but there's examples of City of Burlingame, City of Burbank, Davis, Antioch, Mission Viejo, Orinda, Roswell, Happy Valley, Simi Valley, and Linwood. They all prohibit animal kennels and veterinarians' offices. I think the character of our neighborhood would change, property values would drop, and the negative effect of having an animal clinic of any kind in our neighborhood strongly outweighs the possible benefits to animal owners in Santa Barbara County. As at a previous public meeting in Montecito regarding this issue, I was verbally threatened loudly and in public by Bonnie Franklin's husband, William Brasted, because I oppose their application. Several of my neighbors who witnessed this threat are unwilling to appear here today because of their fear of retaliation. This issue has caused serious adverse effects in our neighborhood already, and I strongly urge you to deny this application for an animal clinic in our neighborhood. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker is Dr. Denver, to be followed by Linda Schillerstrom.
Good morning. Still morning. My name is John Denver. I live at 1425 Greenworth Place. I'm a physician, and I'm here to speak to the denial of the Franklin appeal of a home occupation permit on behalf of myself, my wife, Kathy, and probably to some degree the other residents of Greenworth Place. The little handout just summarizes my comments to help you follow along. The first issue is raised as neighborhood compatibility and privacy. The introduction to the home occupation regulations, which isn't included in the handout here says that the intent is to prevent any adverse effects on the residential enjoyment of the neighborhood. In addition, in item number 10, it says further that it shall not change or detrimentally affect the residential character of the dwelling, a misprint, premises, or the neighborhood in total. There is no question in my mind. My wife and I have lived here for 30 years on Greenworth Place. We have never, ever seen an issue create such turmoil, such distress, and such unhappiness for our neighbors. This street has been a quiet residential area for the whole time we've lived there. The application process alone has caused tremendous turmoil. It will get exponentially worse should there actually be this plan coming to reality. The privacy on Greenworth Place has been invaded. The October 25th denial on this basis was right then, and it is dead right today. Second point, one room. The item number 2 on the regs there for a home occupation state that a home occupation shall be conducted within not more than one room of the dwelling. It also says in the full copy of the document, that which is omitted here, that alterations to the dwelling, there should be no internal alterations to the dwelling not customarily found in such structures. You are asked to believe that the den in question will accommodate all of the requirements for a veterinary clinic. That's hard to believe. Beyond the doubts about this assertion and the discussion we've already had about the spatial issues are the fact that this room, according to the application submitted to the veterinary board by Dr. Franklin, will contain exam tables, or an exam table, animal holding areas, laboratory services, oxygen equipment, anesthetic equipment, ventilation and resuscitation equipment, surgical packs, sterilization equipment, emergency drugs, caps, gowns, and masks, and a freezer which apparently is intended for the disposal or storage and disposal of deceased animals. These items don't belong in any residence that I know of, and they are for activities that are way beyond the scope of the home occupancy permit. Third point, the home occupation shall be conducted solely by the occupants of a dwelling on the lot that contains the home occupation. No employees will be permitted. The applicant does not live on Greenworth Place. I don't know how you define live. I guess I define it when I see my neighbors and I know they're there. She lives in Santa Ynez and has an address there. Her mother, who is elderly and affected severely by the effects of age, a terrible car accident in the past, and a stroke, lives alone in the dwelling and owns the property. The applicant simply does not live on Greenworth Place. She is welcome to visit her mother and does so from time to time, and she is not part of this little community on Greenworth Place. And the last point is the home occupation code defines a series of issues with respect to space. The veterinary clinic code, California Administrative Code, which is in the handout from the staff, also defines minimum requirements. The maximums for the home occupation code are less than and not overlapping with the minimums for a veterinary clinic. All fixed premises, quoting from the veterinary code, where a veterinary medicine is practiced, shall possess minimum standards, and it goes on to list those. All of these things in general exceed the maximums allowed for a home occupation permit. The fact that the vet board administrators have chosen to ignore that law does not change the law. And I believe there remains a conflict in the law regarding the home occupation permit and the California Code regarding veterinary clinics. The October 2005 denial letter on that basis was right then, and it is still right today. I would like to make just one or two very brief comments. The term concierge practice has been used here repeatedly. I guess that can mean whatever you want it to mean, but traditionally in medicine, it's a new item that refers to physicians who limit the members of their practice, and those members are asked to pay oftentimes quite a hefty fee for the privilege of being members of the practice, and they receive some benefits in return, such as a yearly exam. There's no definition of the term concierge that I'm aware of. It is not a term used in the veterinary practice. It is not a category. They use the category fixed premise, which this is, mobile units, which Bonnie Franklin had before, and I think maybe house calls or something like to that effect. The other tangential thing I would like to say is, because there was discussion about the issue of zoning and building permits, it is my understanding, and I certainly would be happy to be corrected if the staff is aware of a different understanding, that the fence which was built around the house is actually wider than Greenworth Place, which measures 9.5 feet at a couple of points. It's actually taller than the width of Greenworth Place. It's 10 feet high, and it is beyond the limit that can be obtained even with a permit for the fence, and there has not been a permit obtained for the fence. I think it's an ongoing zoning violation that confirms its own existence just by looking at the fence and its height. Hopefully it will be corrected at some point, but it, I believe, was misleading to suggest that because there was a permit signed off for a sliding glass door, that all is well with the building department, that everything else is complying with the zoning regulations, because it's not. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next speaker is Linda Schillerstrom, to be followed by Nancy Southland. Southard.
Hi. My name is Linda Schillerstrom, and I live at 1397 Greenworth Place, directly across the street from 1396. I have lived there since 1990. Approval of the proposed animal clinic would set two significant detrimental precedents. First, it would open the door for all kinds of other businesses. It is unimaginable that most Montecito residents, having invested greatly in their homes, would find an animal clinic next door, across the street, or in their neighborhood an appealing prospect. And if this clinic is approved, virtually any business would look like it could operate out of a Montecito home, as long as the way its application was crafted appeared to meet developmental guidelines. An animal clinic in a Montecito neighborhood would undermine the community's long-established special residential character, pave the way for other incompatible businesses, and promote the terrible contentiousness and resentment that has occurred during this permitting process. Second, despite the fact that Bonnie Franklin has presented documentation of her occupancy at 1396 Greenworth Place, she does not live there. She does not stay there 3 or 4 nights a week, as her husband suggested. She does live with her husband and child in San Ynez. If you Google Bonnie Franklin and California, what comes up is a P.O. box in San Ynez plus a San Ynez phone number. Neighbors know that despite her attempt to make it appear otherwise by using her mother's address on her documents, she simply does not live at 1396. Permits for home occupation should not be granted on the basis of how an applicant or her attorney crafts their proposal and documentation, but on actual facts and the nature of the business concerned. Otherwise, any non-occupant could manage to set up a home business in Montecito. That would set a terrible and scary precedent. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Nancy Southard, to be followed by Jane Osonka.
Good morning. My name is Nancy Southard, and I live at 1410 Greenworth Place, the closest neighbor to the Franklins on the south side, I think it is. And I'm just here to address the noise problem, which has been spoken about so much today. I don't really think I need to add much more. It's just that I am an artist, I'm a painter and a sculptor, and I really need some quiet to be able to be creative. And whenever Bonnie is here, the noise of the animals starts up, and without going into past things, I'd just like to say that I am totally against this vet clinic, and I think it's totally preposterous in the first place. I just can't even imagine it. And so if it did go through, I would really consider relocating and selling my property. And I've been there since 1963. I knew Bonnie as a little child. And I think this is really sad. Thank you.
Just a moment. You mentioned that when the animals are there, is there a previous occupancy or presence of animals?
Oh. Yes, there has been many. They had Dalmatians since 1963 on, and now the Dalmatians have not been there for some years, less than, they've been there within 10 years ago, but they would be outside and wouldn't be attended to, and they'd be barking all day, and I would have to leave my home many times, just get my purse, get my car, and go, because I just couldn't bear it. I live close to her. I live very close to her. So it just, and then there were other animals too. Do you want me to mention those?
No, there are some mentioned in the
yes.
Staff report.
Yes.
I just wanted to follow up on your comment.
Yes, it's just been, you know, if you have animals, if you have dogs, and if your dogs are happy and attended to and loved, they're going to be happy dogs. They're not going to be barking all the time. But when you have dogs that are just not given time, and they break through your fence and they attack you and the dog catcher, but that's old stuff. So I thank you.
Just a moment. There are a couple of questions here. Commissioner Phillips?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one quick question. Miss
Southard.
Miss Southard, should a dog be inside the Franklin's home and barking, would you necessarily hear it?
Yes, I would hear it.
Thank you.
I am close to the fence. I am the mother of Sally Hanseth, and my son Clayton Southard is coming to speak. Thank you.
Just a moment. Another question.
Oh.
Yeah, we can't let you off the hook that easy.
Oh.
Because you're the immediate neighbor. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Her mother was a friend of mine. Her mother, who's now 90, was a friend of mine. We went to dinner. We shared art books back and forth through the fence. When the nursing people, after her mother had a bad illness, the nurses or her doctor, someone asked that a neighbor could come and check on her, and would I make a hole through the fence. So I had my gardener make a hole through the fence, and I went in by the barking Dalmatians, which is frightening, to help Ronnie. But that was, and shortly after, the other daughter from San Francisco, Mary, came down for a weekend and quickly shut up the hole, and I didn't know why. And, you know, it kind of hurt my feelings. I was trying to be a good neighbor.
One quick question, if I may. I know this is kind of painful because it's such history, but was it also true that there were pheasants on the property that?
Oh.
Because I'd heard that. Is that? How long ago did that occur?
Well, that was within 10 years ago, like maybe 8 years ago. There were, we have a common fence that runs the whole length of I have an acre. And this is on, let's say, the Santa Barbara side. Mm-hmm. And we have a very long fence, and they were put on the fence. And there were many, many cages, and there were between 200 and 400 pheasants that were raised by Bill to sell to restaurants illegally. And it took us a year or more to get them out for him to, and the dung was not cleared up, so it turned to dust. And I looked out on my high hedges, and they were all beige from the dust. My rose garden and my lawn.
Thank you, that's enough. Thank
Thank you.
Okay, next speaker is Osanka, Ms.
Yes.
Osanka.
Good
To be
afternoon.
followed by Betty Helton.
My name is Jane Osanka. My parents purchased their property in 1950, built their home in 1962. It's 1401 Greenworth Place. I can collaborate what Mrs. Souther just said about the Dalmatians. I have vivid memories of that as a child, being afraid of those dogs. I would like to point out that there are approximately 16 houses on Greenworth Place. Of the 16 residences, only 2, and this was over a year ago, have written letters of support. The remainder of the people, the majority, are certainly and again very much against this. It has caused the most strife I have known since I was a little girl growing up on the street. We've never had this kind of dissension, this kind of problems, this kind of worry, this kind of anguish. We have elderly people on the street. My neighbors next door are 86. The lady across the street is in her 80s. We have young children. We have the whole spectrum. It is a very quiet residential neighborhood. We are very strongly opposed. The majority of the owners on that property, on that street, are opposed to this occupancy. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next speaker is Ms. Helton.
Yes.
To be followed by, is there a Jay Hansett also?
Oh, he's not.
He's not
Move
there.
on to Clay.
All right. Then the next
Clay
one will be Clay Southard. Southard. All right.
Hi,
Please.
my name is Dr. Betty Helton. I live at 1405 Greenworth Place. I'm here to represent myself, my husband, Dr. Alex Weinstein, and our 2 daughters. A portion of the back line of our property borders the Franklin property. I, like the other neighbors, would like to reiterate that Bonnie Franklin and her husband do not reside at 1396 Greenworth Place. On September 7th, 2005, I downloaded a copy from the Veterinary Medical Board website of her vet license status, and at that time, her address was listed as North Refugio Road in San Ynez. In response to the letters that Dr. Franklin has presented as community support for her animal clinic, I would like to make 2 comments. First, she sent out a survey which was misleading because in her survey she did not tell the people she was surveying that her clinic is to be located in the den of her mother's house. Secondly, the respondents do not live on Greenworth Place. Many probably do not even live in Montecito. Third, I have a letter that I received from the Veterinary Medical Board of California. In this letter, it states that a permit was granted on July 25th, 2006 for a veterinary practice located at 1396 Greenworth Place. The letter goes on to say that Dr. Franklin, as the managing licensee, is responsible for meeting the applicable standards of the California Code of Regulations and other standards outside of the board's authority. In other words, by granting this permit, the Veterinary Medical Board does not in any way sanction the location of this proposed clinic. That right belongs to the state of California and Santa Barbara County. Fourth, and I added this one on after listening to this presentation, her single-room clinic does not appear to have hot and cold water. This is required by law and promised by Dr. Franklin's permit application to the Veterinary Medical Board. It appears that the water is either going to be in the kitchen or in a separate room, the bathroom next door. Where is she going to wash her instruments and her hands after handling these animals? Finally, I have a letter that Dr. Franklin distributed to the residents of Greenworth Place. In it, she claims that her animal clinic will have no impact whatsoever on the neighborhood. Nothing could be further from the truth. The permitting process alone has caused enormous turmoil and loss of quality of life for the neighbors. Granting this permit will cause even greater turmoil, divisiveness, and continued erosion of the quality of life in our neighborhood. Please, please deny this appeal, not only for our neighborhood, but all Montecito residential neighborhoods. Save them from a similar fate. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I guess the last speaker is Clayton Southard.
Good afternoon. I just would like to read this one point about drugs and hazardous waste in the Santa Barbara County Code of Regulations. No hazardous materials other than those commonly found within a residence shall be used or stored on the site. There would be an amount of waste, some of it hazardous, both from animals and from their treatment, that would not commonly be found within a residence. There would be drugs and medications and syringes stored in the residence that also would not be commonly found within a residence. We believe drugs, medications, and syringes create an attractive nuisance and would increase the likelihood of break-ins at 1396. There would be sick animals, creating a possible risk for neighbors and neighbors' pets. We cannot now predict how diseases will mutate and form in the future. We believe that all these things create a risk that, no matter how small, should not have to be endured by the neighbors. Thank you.
Thank you. That completes the public comment period. Would the applicant like to respond to any of the remarks made by the public? Please take the rostrum.
I'd like to respond to the pheasant situation. I have here the complaint and investigation record from the county of Santa Barbara regarding these birds. And first of all, I had contact with the Greens, which are on the...
Just a moment, Mr. Bradstad. Is this relevant to the particular issue that we're concerned with here, the presence? This is past history.
This is past history?
Yes, and I don't know that it's really relevant to the issues that we're faced with. Now, do you have any comment about any of the other points that were made?
I was just addressing the time that it's water under the bridge.
I mean, I think we understand that, but we have to make our findings based on current information, and so, I mean, it's like, that's what I'm going to base my consideration, not on things that have happened in the past. And I realize it was brought up in public comment, but for me personally, I'd be disregarding that the public comment as well as your comments with regards to something that happened 8 to 10 years ago.
Okay. I have a couple things. I'm sorry, I don't know the first gentleman's name from the Montecito Association who said that I was not credible, and I find that really insulting. I really don't need to substantiate my credibility. That Montecito Association meeting, there's letters in there that it was handled in a very poor manner. I was insulted. I never really got to say anything during that meeting, and I don't really think that man can judge my character. I don't know him. The other issue is people are talking about health issues. That's addressed by the state veterinarian. That doesn't exist. And the other issue regarding needles, a lot of people are diabetic. A lot of people have drugs that they have to give themselves. Maybe they have MS and they give themselves shots. A lot of people have sharps containers in their own homes. These sharps containers, I have a transportation permit issued by the state of California. It would go into my van. The container's about this big, and it's taken out to a hazardous waste facility at UCSB. Needles, when they are drawn, the needle is taken off. It's dropped into the sharps container. There are not open syringes laying around. This is not a drug use facility. This is a small, limited veterinarian practice. The term concierge, I believe that Dr. Denver is misinterpreting that. I don't know what it's used for as physicians. Actually, the suggestion came from a physician, the term concierge. Concierge is a new term that is used at many hospitals all over the country, and what it is for, physicians and nurses, they want them to stay 12 to 14 hours a day at the facility, so they hire a concierge employees that will go pick up their laundry, that will go take their dog to the vet, that will do all these things that they don't want them to have to leave work to do. And that's what concierge means, including bring them specific meals and that type of thing. You can call Cottage Hospital. They have concierge with their nursing staff. The other thing about carriers, I'm not going to be carrying 70-pound dogs. If a dog is aggressive, I'm not going to treat them. Dog carriers are on rollers. They will not be lifting them. The dogs will not be walked out of the carriers. The other issue with cats, they will always be in a carrier. Linda, I don't know how to pronounce her last name, she was talking about the properties are bunched together. If you were to put that back up on the viewer, you will see that the properties are not bunched together. They're on half-an-acre lots. And Mrs. Southard saying that she is the closest property to us is not true. She has an artist studio right now that I think that the county's looking at that she is in during the day. Her main residence is, I believe it was 174 feet from our den. The closest property is 100 and something or 102 feet. The Greens, who are in support of this hospital. Greg Hugland said he went to high school with me. Be pretty hard to do. I went to Marymount High School. I didn't really know Greg Hugland. I knew of him, probably talked to him 5 times in my entire life. He put a letter that you have on file with the county called a bad neighbor alert in my mailbox, which was offensive, and I don't even know him. He attacked me viciously at the Montecito Association. Dr. Denver spoke how all of this equipment can fit in. I have a picture here I can put up on the viewer for you if you want. I provided this also to you of an anesthetic unit. It's 26 inches at the base, 40 inches at height, if you want to put it up. I'm sure you have it. That's the largest piece of equipment I would have. I have a dental unit, which is approximately the size of a shoebox, a pulse oximeter, which is the size of an iPod. Dr. Denver should be aware that resuscitation equipment is just an ambu bag, which is a little bag when you watch those shows. This is not an anesthetic unit that you see on the TV show ER. It's not a ventilator. That's what it is, and that's the height of it. It's on wheels, it's portable, can be stored. An oxygen container that's about this big hangs off the side of it, and it's stored, can be stored in the closet. Packs, surgery packs are approximately this big. I don't need very many packs. I'm not doing aseptic surgeries. I need probably 4 packs. Gowns are about this big when they're wrapped. All this stuff is small. It fit in the motorhome. That is not an issue. They would easily fit. Sorry, I'm just... I really, truly am insulted and resent people discussing my mother's health. For the record, Dr. Denver said she had a stroke. My mother has never had a stroke. Mrs. Southard said she's assisted my mother. My mother has written Mrs. Southard a letter that she doesn't assist my mother. Mrs. Southard my mother and her have had issues for years, and that is really nothing involved in this meeting. But I don't want people discussing my mother's health who do not know my mother. Dr. Denver, I have never spoken to him in my entire life, saying my mother had a car accident. My father died 45 years ago in a car accident. That's the car accident he's discussing. A lot of these people that came up today, Clay Southard hasn't lived at that residence for probably 20 years. I've never seen him. Well, maybe he does live there. A lot of these neighbors I don't see, I don't know, I've never spoken to. I don't even know the Osenka woman. Most of these people I don't even know. What I'm trying to say is the people saying whether they can see if I'm home at the house or not, I don't know if they're home. How do they know if I'm home? I own 4 cars. How do they know which car I'm driving? The other thing, they brought up the fence permit. If you look at that document there, the permit for the fence, someone called in and said it was too high. 10 feet of it, we had to take approximately 2 inches off for 10 feet. It is permitted. It's on that document. The guy looked at it on Monday because I got another call. I really have to say the neighbor says this has created turmoil. I have written to the neighbors. I called the neighbors. I went to them initially and talked to them. I sent that letter out. They have never discussed it with me. I don't know what turmoil I've caused because I've never even confronted them in any manner. I do know that someone in the neighborhood, and it's documented here, has called elder abuse, claiming I've abused my mother, and that social workers came out and that was dropped. They've called the Veterinarian Association saying I practiced illegally without a license. That was dropped. They've called my employment saying I'm setting up a satellite practice using their name. That was disregarded. So if there's been turmoil, the turmoil has rested on my shoulders. I've had a very hard time. I drove up the street the other day. This gentleman, Greg Huglin, who says that my husband is aggressive, which he is not, started screaming at me as I drove by. It's been very hard. I'm just presenting the facts here. I just want the facts dealt with. And I don't really, that's
Dr.
all
Franklin,
I have to say.
thank you for your comments.
Thank you very much.
All right. Staff, do you have any comments with regard to the remarks that have been made or the questions that have been raised?
No, I don't. If you have any questions that you have from staff, we're happy to help, but we have nothing.
Are there questions of staff at this moment? Council, do you have any remarks?
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, yes, I believe I should address the issue of occupancy. Article 2 does not define occupant. There are no standards by which one interprets the word occupant. You can go to the dictionary definition which staff provided, the one who occupies a particular place, for example. It would be my interpretation that one can be an occupant of more than one location. There are probably quite a few people in Santa Barbara County who have a residence, say in Montecito and in San Francisco or wherever, who consider themselves to be occupants of both. So your determination on that issue should be guided by the evidence you've heard and the things that you would consider to be indices of occupancy, time spent, et cetera.
Okay.
I know your commission understands this, but for the benefit of the public, perhaps as much as your commission, your decision must be guided by the findings that must be made to determine whether a home occupancy, the findings for home occupancy can be made, and those are, of course, before you. They're in Article 2, Section 121.2, those findings, and I'd urge that your commission's deliberation be guided by those issues, and as your commission members of you have recited, not by ancillary issues of things that occurred in the past, nor just to parse out one little issue, the permit process itself, I cannot think can legitimately be interpreted as a basis to determine that something may detrimentally affect a residential character of the neighborhood. In other words, I do not think you could legally make the finding that because an application is controversial, that therefore it's detrimental to the character of the neighborhood, and you can deny it. That's a very circular kind of process and would generate a potentially self-fulfilling prophecy that could be put in place. So I think that's pretty obvious, but those are just some basic points I wanted to make.
You're drawing from the item 10 on the list of findings. It says there that primary resident subordinate to the primary residential use and shall not change or detrimentally affect the residential character
of the dwelling, premises, or neighborhood. And yes, and there's been discussion about how this process has been very upsetting, and that may well be true. All I'm saying is that could not be a basis for finding, for not making finding number 10. Exactly.
Right. Okay, thank you. I think we're ready for a deliberation.
May I ask County Council a question, please?
Yes, you may.
We've had public testimony that that property values could potentially be impacted. Now, would that come under detrimentally affect the residential character of the, you know, I mean,
Mr.
we're
Chair,
charged
Commissioner-
with somewhat protecting property values, you know, and yet,
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Gostanger, members of the Commission, there are general plan policies to promote property values. Our office has advised before that provided an application for a particular permit falls within the ambit of the standards requisite to that permit, property value is not a basis for making that determination. And I'd note that, again, were that to be the case, as has been pointed out, for home occupations, there is no limitation on the type of occupation. The protections that are envisioned by the ordinance are those findings which have to be made, which are intended to protect the
I understand.
neighborhood, of course.
Thank you.
Commissioner Berg?
Are we ready for deliberation? 'Cause
I believe we are.
That's where I'm headed. Well, I find that this business is not the type of business I can support for home occupancy. I just don't think that was what was envisioned when I realize that the ordinance is very wide to allow us the discretion, but I just don't see this as fitting into that category. I tended to agree with Victoria Green's comments that you can almost extrapolate what might be a standard by looking at the fact that animal hospital type things were designed to be in a commercial district under Article 2. And I think that's very telling as to what the people that were drafting our ordinances were thinking of at the time. And I also thought that Greg Hewlin's analysis of how many other communities have dealt with this issue in terms of what are acceptable and not acceptable is sort of, it doesn't apply directly to us, but it gives us an idea of, you know, although we have broad discretion, how some other communities have looked at and analyzed that discretion. So based on that type of analysis, I would strongly recommend that this is something that we should deny the appeal, deny the project, and uphold the findings. And I think I would go so far as to say that this type of thing, I thought staff did a good job, and we could put this type of business occupancy on our consent calendar versus, I mean, I think this was a good exercise for us to sort of vet how we look at some of these, but I see home occupancy as being more in the nature of an architectural practice, maybe. There's probably no reason to go down that road, but not this type of a business. And one last comment, just since I've got the floor here, I thought the attachment D in the P&D letter really states the position at it's what is it, paragraph 4 at the bottom. It says there's a great potential for this home business to detrimentally affect the residential character of the neighborhood. And I think that's really the bottom line. It might not, but I think the chances that it would are high. And on that basis alone, we just, it would be inappropriate to allow this use.
I'll hold on the request or suggestion to staff that if they want to make a comment later, we'll come back to it. Commissioner Tilcher?
Thank you, Chairman McGrath. I'm sorry this has been such a painful process. It seems like it's gone on for a long time, but I totally agree with Montecito Association's letter. I can't support it. I would vote for denial of the appeal. Clearly neighborhood compatibility is a huge issue, and it's not there for this project, for this applicant. I don't think it meets that test at all, and I do think it sets a terrible precedent for future applicants requesting this kind of a commercial use in a residential zone. And I don't, clearly the community plan, I don't think ever envisioned that we would have this kind of use in a residential zone. So I would oppose it.
Commissioner Phillips?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I I strongly believe that that in fact, all of us have a special obligation to, excuse me,
Answer their phone.
to not answer my phone when I'm
Especially in the middle of
sitting
your
up here.
speech.
That we have a special obligation to attempt to support an applicant when an intended use is unpopular. And I brought that to my consideration. I really tried to find a way to make this work. However, these regulations, there are 11 of them,
Findings.
findings. I think, well, I think tell the story, and they all have to be, all the criteria have to be met. The word occupant isn't defined and isn't defined on purpose, and we know in legislative analysis you bring a simple definition to that term, occupant of the premises. We all know what that means, and I don't think the applicant has met that burden. There's got to be a noise issue, and I don't know how you can guarantee that it isn't. There may be an odor issue. That van may not be incidental to a residential use. There's 3 or 4 things going on. Again, I think even taking that extra step with your application, and I admire what you're trying to accomplish, it just doesn't seem appropriate at that locale, and I would have to support Commissioner Barrick's view that we not approve it, or deny the appeal, I guess, in this case. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I have a couple comments. I think the definition of occupancy is liberal in the extreme. However, as has been pointed out, there are many people who own more than one property, and they do occupy both, more than one. But that's not the issue that I'm concerned with in first order. I am concerned with the finding number 10, which says that the home occupation shall be strictly secondary and subordinate to the primary residential use and shall not change or detrimentally affect the residential character of the neighborhood. I feel that this particular occupation as proposed would affect the neighborhood detrimentally, and therefore I would be opposed, would not accept the appeal. Are there any other comments in this, in the course of our deliberation?
Mr. Chair, since it's very clear where you're going, I'd recommend that you augment your findings to indicate what you as a commission have just expressed. And I think that finding and criteria number 6 and number 10 ought to be included in the finding number 1 in attachment A, and that is that the home occupation shall not create any radio or television interference or create noise audible beyond the premises.
Right.
What I've heard is that there's some doubt that finding could be met, and then clearly I think every commissioner has talked about, that's spoken, has talked about finding number 10, which we don't reference, and that's the finding about detrimentally affecting the character of the surrounding area. So I would recommend that you add reference to those 2
6 and 10.
criteria.
Correct.
What, can I jump in here then?
Commissioner Gotzenker?
I personally can't make a finding for number 9 either. No vehicles or trailers except those incidental to residential use. Well, driving a veterinarian van is for pickup of animals is not incidental to the residential use. So I couldn't make that I mean, for me, a number 9 is in there. And then I also...
let me, just a moment,
Yeah.
Commissioner. It does say, however, in number 9, shall be kept on the premises.
And those allowed under shall be kept on the...
Yeah. The question is the van kept there? It may be
Well,
brought
during
in and
the
out.
day.
is brought in and out, but I don't know how you would define kept under
Well,
those
wouldn't it be
circumstances.
kept there if one says, if the one is spending the night, it would be there?
Well, Mr. Chair, you
I
can,
I don't know.
certainly,
Okay,
you
whatever.
can certainly
you
add
know.
this. I don't think it's a primary consideration. It
Okay.
is a residential type of a vehicle. I don't think it'll be
Okay.
identifiable as transporting animals, so
Thank you, Secretary,
there's no harm either way.
and Counsel, who is giving his remarks silently. Commissioner, do you have any other comment? Gottstanker? No. Commissioner Bering?
I'd like to move the recommendations and procedures on page 2 of our staff report to deny the appeal, deny the project, and adopt the required findings. And specifically, I'd like the motion to reference that we could not find items 3, 6, and 10 to have been met by the applicant.
Well, hold on.
That's related to home occupancy.
Yeah.
The audible beyond the boundaries, the noise issue, and lastly, that it's secondary and not detrimental to the residential character.
I'll second that motion.
I have a question for Counsel. Given the very flexible or loose interpretation of the word occupant, is it appropriate to invoke item 3, finding 3?
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, I would include it, add it to your findings. There certainly was evidence from which you could find that there was occupancy, but that is a matter of interpretation of the evidence, and some commissioners did not agree. That's my
And
interpretation of your action.
Mr. Chair, we actually have that in
Yeah.
Attachment A findings already, so I think you're just adding 6 and 10.
6 and 10, right.
Mhm.
There's been a motion, and I believe that Commissioner Gottstanker seconded it. Is there further discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion is carried unanimously. We have a couple of other pieces of business here to conduct.
Mr. Chair, we do. One is to confirm what would be your next hearing date, I guess. And that would be a special hearing for the Westmont project. And we had recommended October 16th. We've since confirmed that the room is available, staff is available, the applicant will make themselves available. So we just need to know that all the commissioners are available for October 16th. Yes, everybody else is, the room and staff and the applicant are all confirmed. It's amazing what I can do while sitting.
That clears the date when I'm back from my trip.
You're actually gone in November. We're talking about October 16th.
Oh, you're talking about October.
Right. So I'm
Okay,
I'm
so the
seeing,
16th.
Nobody say that's not an okay date, so that will be your next meeting. It'll be a special hearing on October 16th, all Westmont. And
There was
then,
the 16th and the 18th.
and then on your regular hearing date of October 18th, we will reserve most of that day for Westmont, and then we'll have that subcommittee briefing for your commission.
Okay.
And then we will not have the 19th because your full commission's not available. The other piece of business that we have remaining is approval of the minutes. And I think those minutes were emailed out to your commission on Sunday. So hopefully you've had an opportunity to take a look at them, because we do try and provide the minutes for the public
Ms.
a month after.
Pujol, please remain. I have a question for you.
So are there any questions or comments on the minutes from August 16th?
Are we ready to make a motion on the minutes? Commissioner Tilcher.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry. I'd love to make the motion, but I don't remember getting the email. Did you? Everybody else got it?
All right.
Then I must have got it and somehow missed it.
Okay, but you have a hard copy right now.
Yes, I do. I just haven't had a chance to read it.
All right.
I'll make a motion for approval of our minutes.
It's been moved and
Second.
and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, one question. Commissioner Berrig had made a comment, an observation, if you like, with regard to this matter of interpretation of the kind of businesses that, home occupancy businesses that might be appropriate. And he brought up an idea, and I don't know how staff would respond to that suggestion.
Mr. Chair, I don't think it's appropriate in the context of this hearing to try to set parameters for home occupation permits. If that's something you want us to take up, we'll have to see if we can work that into the work program of the department, but I don't think it's something that's appropriate today. People heard how your commission voted on this. I think that's instructive in and of itself, and I don't think we should go further today.
And we look forward to any comment that you'd like to make in the future with regard to that idea.
Okay.
Just to follow on that, Mr. Chair, so that would be a legislative action, something inappropriate for us to do. On the other hand, the community spending time and money and effort and maybe missed this hearing and is going to run into the same vote. They'll hear about it. So I guess that's the way we just have to handle each one on their own merits. Huh?
Mr. Chair, I think it is, and Commissioner Phillips, I think the ordinance is broad on purpose to allow some interpretation by your commission, and I think that people who are doing their jobs and researching and coming in and talking to staff will understand decisions that are made by the commission. Something we could do, we are compiling a list of ordinance amendments that we could pursue in the future, and we can certainly add clarification of appropriate home occupations to that list for the board's consideration and for the department's consideration in the future. So that's something we can add and decide how it matches up in terms of priority for amendments. So if you'd like us to do that, I'd be happy to do that.
I think that reflects our thoughts on the subject.
Great.
Any other comments? Council, do you have anything? All right. That said, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.